Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, she noticed it the second night. One switch turned on the overhead light, but the other one did nothing. Until she flipped it while standing outside the room. From inside, she heard something drag across the floor. When she opened the door, the bed had moved. Jessica Winters didn't want to move to 317 Oakwood Drive. The two-bedroom craftsman in the sleepy town of Millfield, Connecticut, wasn't her idea. It was Daniel's. Her husband of 3 years had gotten the job offer at Millfield Memorial Hospital, a significant step up from his residency in Boston, and the real estate prices were reasonable enough that they could finally stop renting. "It's perfect, Jess," he had said when they toured the property in late October of 2018. The real estate agent, a woman named Marcy with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a smile that never reached her eyes, stood in the corner of the living room while Daniel measured the walls for their furniture. Jessica remembered standing in that upstairs bedroom, the one that would become her home office, and feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air outside. The previous owners had left little behind, just dust and faded rectangles on the walls where pictures once hung, and those two light switches side by the doorway. She tried the first one. The ceiling light came on, a simple fixture casting a warm glow across the empty room. Then she tried the second switch. Nothing happened. She flicked it up and down several times. "Oh, that one doesn't work," Marcy had said, suddenly appearing behind her. Previous owners mentioned it, something about faulty wiring they never got around to fixing. Jessica nodded, but something about the placement bothered her. Why install two switches so close together if one served no purpose? They moved in the following month. November in New England brought early darkness and a penetrating cold. Daniel's shifts at the hospital often ran late, leaving Jessica alone in the unfamiliar house. As a freelance graphic designer, she set up her workspace in that second bedroom with the peculiar switches. On the second night, while Daniel was working the overnight shift, Jessica stayed up late finishing a project. It was nearly 2 a.m. when she turned off her computer. Exhausted, she flipped the first switch, plunging the room into darkness, and stepped into the hallway. On a whim, she reached back and flipped the second switch, the one that supposedly did nothing. From inside the darkened room came a sound, subtle but unmistakable, of something heavy dragging across the hardwood floor. Jessica froze. The house was old. It settled and creaked. That's what Daniel would say, but the sound wasn't a creak. It was a deliberate scraping, like furniture being moved. Heart pounding, she pushed the door open. In the dim light from the hallway, she could see that her desk was exactly where it had been. But the small armchair in the corner, the one she'd positioned perfectly beneath the window, had moved about 2 feet toward the center of the room. Jessica convinced herself she was mistaken about where she'd left the chair. She was tired after all. She moved it back and went to bed, locking the bedroom door behind her. The next day, she didn't mention it to Daniel during their brief morning overlap. It seemed silly in the daylight. But that evening, after he left for another night shift, she found herself standing at the threshold of her office, staring at those two switches. This time she was methodical. She took a photo of the room with her phone, noting the exact position of each piece of furniture. Then she turned off the light with the first switch, stepped into the hall, and flipped the second switch. The same dragging sound came from within. When she opened the door, the desk chair had rotated 180 degrees, now facing the door instead of the desk. Jessica's hands trembled as she compared the scene to her photo. There was no mistake this time. Something was happening when she flipped that switch. She called Daniel at the hospital, but he sounded distracted, busy with patients. "Jess, it's probably just the vibrations from the heating system or something," he said. "Old houses make weird noises. I'll check it out when I get home." But by the time Daniel returned the next morning, Jessica had spent a sleepless night in their bedroom, door locked, a chair wedged under the handle. Daniel inspected the switch and found nothing unusual. He even called an electrician, who confirmed there was no power running to it. "It's not connected to anything, ma'am," the electrician, a man named Roy with grease-stained hands and kind eyes, told her. "It's just a dummy switch. Previous owners might have had something wired to it once, but not anymore." Jessica nodded, thanked him, and paid his fee, but she knew what she had heard, what she had seen. That night, with Daniel finally home and asleep beside her, Jessica crept into the hallway with her phone set to record video. She entered her office, positioned the phone on the desk with a clear view of the room, and hit record. Then she turned off the light, stepped out, and flipped the second switch. The dragging sound was louder this time, more deliberate. She counted to 10 before opening the door and turning on the light. The desk had moved several inches, the chair was tipped over, and on the wall, where nothing had been before, were 3 long scratches in the paint. Jessica grabbed her phone with shaking hands and stopped the recording. She watched it immediately, huddled in the hallway. The footage showed an empty room, then darkness when she turned off the light. In the darkness, something moved, a shadow darker than the room itself, shifting across the floor. Then the desk moved, seemingly on its own, and the chair tipped over. Just before the video ended, something passed in front of the camera, just a blur, but unmistakably there. Jessica delighted the video. The next day, while Daniel slept before his evening shift, she researched the history of 317 Oakwood Drive. The local library had digitized newspapers going back decades. It took hours of searching, but finally, in an article from 1984, she found it. "Local man found dead in home." The article was brief. Martin Greaves, 47, was found deceased in his home at 317 Oakwood Drive after neighbors reported not seeing him for several days. Police ruled it an apparent suicide. He was found in the second bedroom, hanging from the ceiling fixture. Jessica stared at the small print until her eyes burned. The article mentioned that Greaves had been a contractor who had renovated the house himself after purchasing it 2 years prior. When she returned home, Jessica examined the ceiling fixture in her office, the same one that turned on with the first switch. Had it been replaced since 1984, it looked old enough to be original. That evening, as Daniel prepared to leave for work, Jessica finally told him everything. The moving furniture, the research, the scratches on the wall that they had both pretended not to notice at breakfast. "I want to move, Daniel," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't stay here anymore." Daniel sat beside her on the couch, his face serious. "Maybe we should set up a camera, get real evidence of what's happening." "I did," Jessica whispered, "last night, but I deleted it. I saw something." "What did you see?" Daniel's voice was gentle, but she could hear the concern not for the house, but for her mental state. Something moving in the dark, it wasn't natural. Daniel was silent for a long moment. I'll call Marcy tomorrow, ask her what she knows about the house's history. But when Daniel called the next day, Marcy's office informed him that she no longer worked for the agency. She had quit abruptly 2 months ago, shortly after their closing. Jessica spent the day removing everything from her office. She worked from the kitchen table now, refusing to enter that room. That night, with Daniel once again at the hospital, Jessica heard the dragging sound, but this time it came from their bedroom upstairs. She nearly crashed her car driving to the hospital. Daniel found her in the parking lot, hyperventilating. "I need to show you something," she said once she could speak again. They returned home together at dawn. Jessica led Daniel to the bedroom they shared and pointed to the wall behind their bed, a wall that had been blank when they went to sleep the previous morning. There, scratched into the paint in crude, uneven letters, "I wired this house to watch." They moved out the next day, staying in a hotel while their realtor rushed to find new buyers. The house sold quickly, suspiciously so, to a young couple from out of state. 3 months later, Jessica received an envelope in the mail with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping about Martin Greaves's suicide in 1984. Someone had circled a detail she had missed in her research. Before becoming a contractor, Greaves had worked as an electrical engineer for a government defense project, one that remained classified. On the back of the clipping, written in neat block letters, was a message. "Some switches should stay off." The signature below was simply M, with a perfect, practiced smile that never reached her eyes. In their new home, 50 miles away, Jessica insists on having only one light switch per room, and she never, ever stands outside a doorway while operating it. Crime 2, the landlord said the attic was off limits. She didn't ask why, but curiosity won. Inside, under a tarp, was an old suitcase bound with belts and stained at the corners. When she opened it, all it contained was a mirror, and her name carved into the glass. Meredith Sawyer had always been drawn to old houses. There was something about their history, the lives that had unfolded within their walls, that fascinated her. When she found the Victorian on Hawthorne Lane in the small town of Millfield, Massachusetts, she knew it was perfect, even with its peculiarities. The rent was surprisingly affordable, and the landlord, Mr. Gaines, seemed eager to have her move in. "The house is yours to enjoy," he'd said with a tight smile when handing over the keys, "except for the attic. That space remains locked. Previous plumbing issues, structural concerns, nothing for you to worry about." Mr. Gaines was a slender man in his 60s with careful eyes that never quite met hers. He owned several properties throughout Millfield, a town of just under 9,000 people nestled in the Berkshires. Everyone knew him, but few claimed to know him well. Meredith agreed to the terms without hesitation. At 28, she was starting over after leaving a marketing job in Boston. Millfield offered the quiet she craved, and the house on Hawthorne Lane felt like the perfect refuge. She didn't need an attic. For the first 3 months, Meredith settled into a comfortable routine. She found work at the local library, made a few acquaintances, and spent evenings restoring furniture she'd find at yard sales. The house creaked and settled at night, as old houses do, but she found the sounds comforting rather than concerning. Then the dreams began. They always featured the same scenario. Meredith would find herself standing before the attic door, key in hand. The door would swing open, revealing stairs that ascended into darkness. Something waited for her at the top, something important, but she always woke before discovering what it was. After 2 weeks of the recurring dream, Meredith found herself studying the attic door during her waking hours. It was a simple door at the end of the upstairs hallway, painted the same cream color as the walls with an old-fashioned keyhole. Nothing remarkable about it, except for the fact that it was forbidden. "You should ask your landlord what's up there," suggested Diane, a co-worker who had lived in Millfield her entire life. "That house has been a rental for nearly 20 years, and I've never heard anyone mention an issue with the attic." Meredith called Mr. Gaines that evening. The conversation was brief and one-sided. "The terms of your lease are clear, Miss Sawyer," he said, his voice colder than she remembered. "The attic is off limits. If that arrangement no longer suits you, perhaps this isn't the right property for you." That night the dream returned with greater intensity. This time she made it to the top of the stairs. In the darkness she could make out the shape of something covered by a tarp. She approached it slowly, heart pounding, hand outstretched. Meredith woke drenched in sweat, her alarm clock displaying 3:17 a.m. The next day at the library, she found herself researching the history of her house instead of cataloging new arrivals. Hawthorne Lane had been developed in the late 1800s, with her house built in 1893 for the Thornton family. She traced ownership through the decades, the Thorntons until 1927, then the Merrills until 1956, followed by the Colemans until 1981. After that, records showed the property changed hands several times before Mr. Gaines acquired it in 2003. Nothing in the records suggested tragedy or unusual circumstances. Yet something about the house, about the attic specifically, pulled at her consciousness like an undertow. During her third month in the house, Meredith noticed something odd. While dusting the hallway, she realized that the dimensions didn't make sense. The upstairs hallway seemed shorter than the downstairs one. The house was a perfect rectangle from the outside, but inside, space seemed to be missing, space that would logically be part of the attic. That evening, while organizing her closet, Meredith found a small box she didn't recognize pushed to the back corner. Inside was a single key, old and ornate. She held it up, studying its intricate pattern, wondering what lock it might fit. Her gaze drifted toward the hallway, toward the attic door. Rain tapped against the windows that night as Meredith stood before the forbidden door, key clutched in her palm. The sensible part of her mind argued that she should respect the landlord's rules, that there were probably legitimate reasons for keeping the attic off limits. But the key had been in her closet. Perhaps a previous tenant had found it and hidden it there, or perhaps someone wanted her to find it. The key slid into the lock with surprising ease. One turn and the mechanism clicked. The door swung open on silent hinges, revealing a narrow staircase that disappeared into darkness above. Meredith's hand trembled as she switched on her phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the shadows, illuminating wooden steps coated with a fine layer of dust. No footprints disturbed that dust. No one had been up these stairs in a very long time. She ascended slowly, each step creaking beneath her weight. The air grew thicker, mustier, laden with the scent of neglect and something else, something chemical, like old cleaning products. The attic was smaller than she had imagined and surprisingly empty. No boxes of forgotten belongings, no furniture covered in sheets, just bare wooden floors, sloped ceilings, and a small dormer window that allowed moonlight to filter through its grimy surface. And there, in the center of the room, was a rectangular shape, covered with a faded blue tarp. Meredith approached it cautiously, her flashlight beam dancing across the covered object. It was about 3 feet long and 2 feet wide, the size of a large suitcase or a small trunk. Dark stains discolored the corners of the tarp, and 3 weathered leather belts secured it tightly around whatever lay beneath. With trembling fingers, she untied the first belt, then the second, then the third. The tarp seemed to cling to the object beneath, as if reluctant to reveal its secret. When she finally pulled it away, she found herself staring at an antiquated leather suitcase, its surface cracked with age and discolored at the corners with what looked disturbingly like dried blood. The latches were unlocked. All that remained was to lift the lid. Inside the suitcase was a single item, an ornate hand mirror, its silver backing tarnished with age, its glass surface cloudy but intact. Meredith lifted it carefully, turning it over in her hands. When she held it up to examine her reflection in the dim light, her breath caught in her throat. Etched into the glass in delicate, flowing script was her name, Meredith. She nearly dropped the mirror. It was impossible. This suitcase had been here for years, decades perhaps. How could it contain a mirror with her name? As she stared at the impossible object, something shifted in the glass. For a brief moment, her reflection seemed to change. The face looking back at her was still her own, but older, wearier, with a sadness in the eyes that chilled her to the core. The sound of a car door closing outside broke the spell. Meredith carefully returned the mirror to the suitcase, closed the lid, and replaced the tarp and belts exactly as she had found them. She hurried down the stairs, locked the attic door, and slipped the key into her pocket. The next morning, she called the local historical society and asked if they had any information about the previous occupants of her house. The volunteer who answered seemed hesitant, but agreed to check their records and call her back. 3 hours later, her phone rang. "Ms. Sawyer, this is Helen from the Historical Society. I found something that might interest you. There was a Meredith who lived in your house, Meredith Coleman. She was the daughter of the family that owned the property in the 1970s. Meredith's mouth went dry. What happened to her? A pause. She disappeared in 1981. She was 28 years old, just about your age, I believe. The case was never solved. The family moved away shortly after. That evening, Meredith sat in her living room, turning the attic key over and over in her fingers. Outside, darkness fell, and rain began to tap against the windows once more. She thought about calling Mr. Gaines, about demanding answers, but something told her he wouldn't be forthcoming. The truth, she realized, was waiting for her in the attic, in that suitcase, in that mirror. As she climbed the stairs for the second time, Meredith felt different, not afraid, but resolved. The attic seemed less intimidating now, merely a room with a secret to share. She removed the tarp and belts and opened the suitcase with steady hands. The mirror lay where she had left it, her name etched upon its surface. She lifted it, and once again her reflection shifted, but this time she didn't look away. The face that looked back at her was her own, yet not her own. Same features, different era. The Meredith in the mirror wore her hair in the style of the late 1970s, her expression one of quiet resignation. And as Meredith stared into those familiar, unfamiliar eyes, understanding began to dawn. The dreams, the pull she had felt toward this house from the beginning, the impossible coincidence of her name. "You wanted me to find you," she whispered to the reflection. In Millfield, people still speak of the strange events that followed, how Meredith Sawyer convinced authorities to excavate a specific section of the basement, how they found remains that DNA testing confirmed belonged to Meredith Coleman, missing since 1981. How Mr. Gaines, confronted with evidence linking his father to the Coleman family, suffered a fatal heart attack before he could be questioned. Some say Meredith Sawyer had insider information. Others suggest she simply got lucky with her accusations. Only Meredith knows the truth, that some connections transcend time, that some secrets refuse to stay buried, and that sometimes the past reaches out to the present, seeking not vengeance, but simply to be found. The mirror now sits on her dresser. The name etched upon its surface has faded, but on certain nights when the house creaks and settles, Meredith catches a glimpse of another face looking back at her, a face wearing a smile of peaceful gratitude. In the small town of Millfield, the house on Hawthorne Lane has one less secret now. But those who pass by still speak of seeing two silhouettes in the attic window on rainy nights, two women, separated by decades but united by an unsolved mystery and a name. Crime 3, the small town of Meadowbrook, Missouri, had always been a place where people left their doors unlocked. Located just far enough from St. Louis to maintain its rural character, the community of 8,400 prided itself on its safety record and tight-knit neighborhoods where everyone seemed to know everyone else. Rebecca Simmons had moved into the aging Victorian on Sycamore Street just 3 months earlier. At 32, she was starting over after her divorce, having left Chicago for the more affordable and peaceful setting of Meadowbrook. The house, built in 1912, needed work, but that was part of the appeal. Rebecca had always enjoyed restoration projects, finding solace in the methodical transformation of something neglected into something beautiful. Those who knew Rebecca described her as reserved but friendly. She worked remotely as a graphic designer, which meant she spent most of her days alone in the house. Neighbors would occasionally see her walking her chocolate lab, Max, in the early mornings or tending to the overgrown garden she'd inherited with the property. The weather had turned cold earlier than usual that October, and Rebecca noticed drafts coming from several walls in the house. The insulation was clearly insufficient, particularly in the upstairs guest bedroom where she had set up her home office. After watching several online tutorials, she decided to tackle the project herself rather than wait for a contractor, who in this small town might take weeks to schedule. On October 17, 2023, Rebecca began removing the wood paneling in her office. The work was tedious but straightforward. By mid-afternoon, she had exposed most of the north wall and was surprised to find that behind one section, instead of the expected insulation or brick, there was what appeared to be empty space. She pulled off the paneling to redo the insulation. Behind it was a narrow tunnel just wide enough to crawl through. 10 feet in, she found a blanket, empty water bottles, and a list of names written on the wall. Her name was at the bottom. Next to it, still here. The police report would later note that Rebecca immediately called 911, her voice trembling as she described her discovery to the dispatcher. Officer James Reeves arrived within 12 minutes, followed shortly by Detective Sarah Morgan, who had been handling property crimes in Meadowbrook for the past 8 years. I remember walking into that room and feeling the cold air coming from that hole in the wall, Detective Morgan would later tell reporters. It wasn't just the temperature, there was something about that space that felt wrong, inhabited but not in any way that made sense. The tunnel, as it turned out, was part of an old servant's passage that had been sealed off decades ago during a previous renovation. It connected to a small room approximately 15 feet long and 10 feet wide that wasn't shown on any of the house's blueprints. The space contained evidence of recent occupation, the aforementioned blanket and water bottles, as well as food wrappers, a battery-powered lamp, and a notebook filled with detailed observations about Rebecca's daily routine. Monday works until 6:15, shower at 6:30, dinner alone, bedroom lights out by 10:42. Tuesday phone call with mother lasts 48 minutes, cries afterward, leaves back door unlocked when taking out trash. Wednesday orders delivery, driver stays 4 minutes at door, suspicious, watch him next time. The entries continued for nearly 2 months, predating Rebecca's awareness of anyone watching her. Most disturbing, however, was the list of names etched directly onto the wall of the hidden room with what appeared to be a knife or other sharp implement. Melissa Tanner, David Ackerman, Jennifer Wilkes, Elizabeth Conroy, Rebecca Simmons still here. Detective Morgan recognized the first 4 names immediately. All were women who had lived alone in Meadowbrook or neighboring towns within the past 5 years. All had reported strange occurrences, items moved in their homes, feelings of being watched, unexplained noises, before eventually moving away. None had discovered anything as concrete as Rebecca had. The implications were deeply troubling, Police Chief Robert Wilson noted in his official statement. We had someone who had been systematically targeting individuals, primarily women living alone, and apparently accessing their homes without their knowledge, possibly for extended periods. A forensic team processed the hidden room, collecting fingerprints, hair samples, and other potential evidence. The investigation revealed that the passage could be accessed not only through Rebecca's wall, but also through a nearly invisible entrance in the basement that connected to a storm drain system running beneath Sycamore Street. Rebecca stayed with friends during the initial investigation, returning to the house only once to collect essential belongings before putting the property up for sale. I can't sleep there knowing someone was watching me, she told Detective Morgan. Even if they catch whoever it was, I'll always feel those eyes on me. The fingerprints collected from the room and items within it yielded no matches in any database. The hair samples indicated a male with brown hair, but without a DNA match, this information provided limited value to investigators. As news of the discovery spread through Meadowbrook, other residents came forward with their own stories of unexplained occurrences. Sandra Whitman, who had lived 3 houses down from Rebecca's current home 5 years earlier, described waking up to find her kitchen rearranged subtly, cups in different cabinets, chairs at slightly different angles. I thought I was losing my mind, she told investigators. My husband said I was just stressed about work. Eventually, I started taking photos of rooms before I went to bed so I could prove things were moving. Robert Chambers, who rented an apartment on the other side of town, reported hearing scratching within his walls that his landlord dismissed as rodents. But it wasn't random, Chambers insisted. It had patterns, almost like code. The investigation expanded as detectives began interviewing former residents of Rebecca's house and the surrounding properties. They discovered that the storm drain system connecting to the hidden entrance had been part of an early 1900s attempt to manage flooding in the area. Most of the drains had been sealed or modernized, but sections beneath the older parts of town remained largely unchanged and unmapped. 6 weeks into the investigation, police identified a person of interest, 44-year-old Edward Mercer, a former utility worker who had been employed by the town of Meadowbrook until 2019. Mercer had worked specifically with the water and sewer systems and would have had extensive knowledge of the underground infrastructure. He had left his position abruptly, citing personal reasons, and continued to live alone in a small house on the outskirts of town. When detectives arrived at Mercer's residence with a search warrant, they found it empty. A neighbor reported seeing Mercer loading his car the previous evening, mentioning something about visiting family out of state. Inside the house, investigators discovered detailed maps of Meadowbrook's underground systems, including several passages not documented in official city plans. They also found a collection of small personal items, a hairbrush with strands of blonde hair, a woman's earring, a handwritten shopping list, each stored in labeled plastic bags with dates and locations noted. Most disturbing was a journal containing entries similar to those found in Rebecca's wall space, but covering multiple individuals over a period of nearly 7 years. The journal referred to its subjects not by name but by numbers, with detailed notes about their habits, vulnerabilities, and in some cases, what appeared to be assessments of their suitability for some unstated purpose. Subject 17 aware of presence, increasingly paranoid, time to move on. Subject 22 lives alone, no visitors, works night shifts, perfect conditions. Subject 26, Rebecca, represents ideal candidate, final preparations underway. Despite an interstate manhunt and the circulation of Mercer's description to law enforcement agencies nationwide, he remained at large. His vehicle was discovered abandoned at a bus terminal in Kansas City 3 days after the search of his home, but security footage showed him boarding a bus for Denver, after which the trail went cold. Rebecca ultimately relocated to Portland, Oregon, where she continues to work remotely. She declined to be interviewed for this story, but provided a brief statement through her attorney. "I've installed every security system available in my new home. I sleep with the lights on. I'm trying to move forward, but I check behind every wall panel, and I can't help but wonder if I'm still on someone's list, still being watched." The house on Sycamore Street remains unsold, its price dropping with each passing month. Local real estate agents report that potential buyers invariably ask about the hole in the wall and lose interest upon hearing the story. The current owner has sealed the passage and hidden room with concrete, but as Detective Morgan noted in her final case notes, the physical space can be closed, but the psychological damage inflicted on this community, the violation of our most basic sense of security, may never be fully repaired. The names on the wall have become a fixation for amateur sleuths online who track the current whereabouts of Melissa, David, Jennifer, and Elizabeth, searching for patterns or connections that might lead to Mercer. All 4 have been contacted by authorities and offered protection, though none have reported further suspicious activity. As for the meaning of "still here" next to Rebecca's name, investigators have offered several theories. That Mercer was still occupying the space at the time of discovery, that he considered Rebecca's home his current project, or most disturbing, that despite her move across the country, he still considers her his in some way. The case remains open, one of several dozen active investigations into what authorities now suspect may be a serial stalker responsible for creating hidden observation posts in homes across the Midwest. Edward Mercer, if that is indeed his real name, has not used his social security number, credit cards, or any traceable identification since his disappearance. Meanwhile, in towns like Meadowbrook, residents now eye their walls differently, listening for sounds that might not be settling pipes or aging wood. They check their doors twice before bed, install security cameras, and wonder about the spaces between walls, the invisible boundaries between safety and violation that once breached can never feel secure again. Crime 4, the house came fully furnished, even the curtains. While washing them, she noticed a strip of cloth sewn into the bottom hem, It read, "Don't sleep in this room." She already had. Allendale, Michigan wasn't where Elise Harmon had planned to start over, but at 27, plans rarely unfold as expected. It was September 2019 when she signed the lease on the rental home, a modest two-bedroom Craftsman on Oakwood Street with faded blue paint and a small front porch, the kind of place where nothing extraordinary happens. Elise had left behind a 5-year relationship in Chicago, 300 miles of Interstate 96 separating her from what she referred to as the mistake years. She'd arrived with just her Honda Civic packed with essentials, grateful that the rental came furnished, a dining table with 4 mismatched chairs, a worn leather sofa, a queen bed with a headboard that creaked, and heavy beige curtains that smelled faintly of someone else's life. Neighbors described Elise as quiet but friendly. She worked remotely as a graphic designer, her laptop often glowing through her living room window well past midnight. The elderly couple next door, the Kellys, brought her a blueberry pie her first week. Martin from across the street helped jump her car battery when the Michigan winter proved too harsh. Small town courtesies that made her feel less alone. She seemed grateful to be somewhere new, Martin would later tell Detective Sarah Lowell, like someone catching their breath after running for too long. It was during her 3rd week at the house when Elise decided the curtains needed washing. The autumn sunlight revealed years of dust trapped in their fibers, and the musty smell intensified whenever the heating system kicked on. She unhooked them from the bedroom window, noticing how substantial they felt in her arms, heavy cotton with a lined backing that blocked out the street lights at night. In her small laundry room, while separating the curtain panels, her fingers brushed against something unusual in the hem, a strip of fabric with irregular stitching that didn't match the machine-perfect seams elsewhere. Turning the curtain inside out, she noticed that a section of the hem had been opened and resewn by hand, the thread a slightly different shade. Curiosity piqued, Elise found a pair of scissors and carefully unpicked the stitches. Inside the hem was a narrow strip of white cotton, folded multiple times. When unfolded, the message appeared in neat, deliberate handwriting, "Don't sleep in this room." She laughed at first, a nervous sound that died quickly in the empty house. Her rational mind suggested a prank by previous tenants. Yet the care taken to hide the message suggested something more deliberate than casual mischief. That night, Elise moved her pillow and comforter to the couch, telling herself it was ridiculous. By morning, with sunlight streaming through the newly bare windows, she felt foolish enough to move back to the bedroom. She rehung the curtains, message safely hidden in her bedside drawer. 2 weeks passed uneventfully. October brought colder temperatures and earlier sunsets. Elise began experiencing headaches, mild at first, then increasingly severe. She attributed them to eye strain from her long hours at the computer, but over-the-counter medication provided little relief. Then came the dreams, repetitive sequences of standing at her bedroom window, watching someone in her yard. The details were always just beyond recall when she woke. On October 28th, Elise called her landlord, Dan Mercer, asking if the house had ever had issues with carbon monoxide. The headaches were getting worse, she explained, and she'd been experiencing dizziness and confusion. "I'll send someone over to check," he promised. "The house passed inspection before you moved in, but better safe than sorry." Later that afternoon, a technician from the gas company found no carbon monoxide issues, but noted that the bedroom had poor air circulation. "These older homes, the ventilation isn't great," he told Elise. "Maybe sleep with the window cracked." That night, Elise texted her friend Tara, still feeling weird, hard to focus, dreams getting more vivid. 3 days later on Halloween, Mrs. Kelly noticed Elise's mail accumulating in her box. She hadn't seen the young woman in 2 days. Lights remained on in the house at all hours, but knocks at the door went unanswered. After another day passed, concerned, she called the property manager. When Dan Mercer entered the home with his master key on November 1st, he found Elise in her bedroom, unconscious but alive. The room was stifling, all windows sealed tight, the heating turned to maximum. Medical responders later recorded her body temperature at 104 F and diagnosed severe dehydration alongside what appeared to be symptoms of environmental poisoning. Detective Sarah Lowell entered the case when the hospital toxicology report revealed elevated levels of organophosphates in Elise's system, compounds commonly found in certain insecticides. A search of the property discovered no containers of such chemicals, but testing of dust samples from the bedroom curtains revealed significant residue. The fabric had been treated with something, Lowell explained in her case notes. Not enough to cause immediate symptoms, but with ongoing exposure in a closed environment, especially when heated, it released compounds that could cause the symptoms Ms. Harmon experienced. Further investigation revealed that the house on Oakwood Street had a troubling history, though nothing that had warranted disclosure to new tenants. 9 months earlier, the previous resident, graduate student Michael Wheeler, had been hospitalized with similar symptoms of confusion and hallucinations. He had terminated his lease early, citing health reasons. When interviewed at his new residence in Grand Rapids, Wheeler appeared nervous. "I thought I was losing my mind," he admitted. "The dreams, the headaches. I started sleeping on the couch and the symptoms improved. When I tried moving back to the bedroom, they returned worse than before." Had he left any warning for future tenants? Wheeler looked away. "I tried telling the landlord something was wrong with that room. He said it was all in my head." The landlord, Dan Mercer, denied any knowledge of deliberate poisoning. The house was professionally cleaned between tenants, he insisted. "All furnishings were there when I purchased the property in 2018. Records showed Mercer had bought the house after the death of its elderly owner, Margaret Langdon, who had lived there for 40 years. Her grandson had handled the estate sale. It was the grandson, Peter Langdon, who provided the most disturbing revelation. "My grandmother was paranoid in her final years," he explained to Detective Lowell. "She was convinced someone was trying to poison her. She would talk about protecting herself, about making sure they couldn't get to her." Laboratory analysis eventually determined that the curtain's fabric had been treated with a homemade solution containing diazinon, an insecticide banned for indoor use due to its neurotoxic properties. The careful, deliberate application suggested it wasn't accidental contamination. Had Margaret Langdon, in her paranoia, created a toxic safeguard that later became a hazard, or was something more deliberate at play? The message in the hem remained unexplained. Forensic analysis dated the handwriting as likely less than a year old, well after Margaret Langdon's death. Michael Wheeler denied writing it. When shown the message, he turned pale. "I wish I'd found that," was all he said. Elise Harmon recovered after a week in the hospital, but refused to return to the house. Her belongings were packed by friends while she stayed with the Kellys. The rental was declared uninhabitable pending professional decontamination. 6 months later, with the investigation technically still open but inactive, Detective Lowell received an envelope containing a single page of stationery. On it was handwriting that matched the warning from the curtain hem. The message was brief. There are 3 other houses. Look for the curtains. No sender was identified. The postmark showed it had been mailed from Chicago, where Elise had lived before moving to Allendale, where her ex-partner still resided. The case file remains open. The house on Oakwood Street stands empty, its windows bare of any curtains, while Detective Lowell continues to search for connections between seemingly unrelated cases of unexplained poisonings across the Midwest. And somewhere, perhaps, heavy beige curtains hang in another bedroom, their hems concealing warnings yet to be discovered. Crime 5, the daycare had been closed for decades, but during cleanup they found something beneath the sandbox. A mannequin, lifelike and child-sized, dressed in real clothes. Inside its chest was a locket with a school photo inside. It had been ripped down the middle. Only half a face remained. Millfield, Ohio had always been the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked. A small town with just under 15,000 residents, where the local diner served the same breakfast special for 30 years, and where most families had lived for at least 3 generations. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, or at least that's what they thought. The Little Explorers Daycare Center on Willow Street had been a fixture in the community since the 1970s. Miss Patricia Holloway, a former kindergarten teacher with a warm smile and silver hair always pinned neatly in a bun, had run the daycare until her retirement in 1998. The property had sat abandoned since then, gradually deteriorating as ownership disputes tied it up in legal battles between Miss Patricia's distant relatives. By 2022, the once cheerful yellow building with its faded alphabet mural had become an eyesore. Windows boarded up, ivy creeping across the facade, the playground equipment rusted and dangerous. The town council finally acquired the property through eminent domain, with plans to demolish the structure and build a community center in its place. It was on a crisp October morning when Marcus Delaney, a 42-year-old contractor, arrived with his crew to begin preliminary site cleanup before demolition. Marcus had grown up in Millfield. He'd even attended Little Explorers as a child and remembered Miss Patricia giving him animal crackers when he'd scraped his knee on the playground asphalt. "Start with the playground equipment," Marcus instructed his crew. "We'll tackle the building interior tomorrow." The playground wasn't large, just a modest swing set, a small slide, and a sandbox shaped like a turtle. The sandbox had always been the centerpiece, its green concrete shell painted to resemble a smiling turtle, with the sand contained in its oval body. The paint had long since chipped away, leaving just hints of the cheerful green it once was. As 2 workers began removing the concrete shell of the sandbox, they noticed something strange. The sand didn't seem to disperse naturally. It clung together in an unusual pattern, as if something beneath it was holding it in place. One of the workers, Jake Hudson, a young man in his 20s, dug deeper with his shovel. "Hey, there's something down here," he called out to Marcus. "Feels like plastic or something." Marcus came over, his curiosity piqued. Careful now, could be an old toy or something. But as they cleared away more sand, what emerged was far more disturbing than an abandoned toy. A pale form began to take shape, small, human-like, with articulated limbs. "Jesus Christ," whispered Jake, stumbling backward. Is that a body?" Marcus leaned closer, his heart pounding, but relief washed over him as he recognized what it actually was. "It's a mannequin," he said, though his voice remained tense. "A child-sized display mannequin." The mannequin was approximately the size of a 5-year-old child. What made it unsettling wasn't just its presence buried in a children's sandbox, but how it had been treated. Someone had dressed it in real children's clothes, faded blue jeans, a red and white striped t-shirt, and small sneakers, all from what appeared to be the late 1980s or early 1990s based on the style. The clothes were remarkably well preserved, protected from the elements by the sand. The mannequin's face was eerily detailed, with painted blue eyes and molded plastic lips curved into a slight smile. Its hair, actual synthetic hair, had been attached to the plastic head, styled in a bowl cut typical of the era. Who would bury a dressed-up mannequin in a daycare sandbox? Jake asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. Marcus instructed his crew to carefully remove the mannequin and place it on a tarp nearby. As they lifted it, something shifted inside the plastic torso. A faint metallic sound, like something sliding against the interior of the hollow figure. With gloved hands, Marcus examined the mannequin more closely. There was a seam running down its chest, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. When he applied gentle pressure, the front of the torso popped open like a cabinet. Inside the hollow chest cavity was a single item, a small, heart-shaped silver locket on a thin chain. Marcus carefully removed it, holding it up to the autumn sunlight. The locket was tarnished but intact. With his thumbnail, he gently pried it open. Inside was a school photograph, the kind taken annually in elementary schools across America. But the photo had been torn precisely down the middle. Only half remained, showing half a child's face, a single blue eye, half a smile, and one ear. The torn edge was jagged but deliberate. The half face appeared to be that of a young boy, perhaps 7 or 8 years old. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, despite the warm October sun. "Call the police," he said quietly to Jake. "Now." Within an hour, the decaying playground had been transformed into a crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off the area as Detective Laura Mercer of the Millfield Police Department examined the mannequin and its contents. At 45, Detective Mercer had spent most of her career handling petty thefts and occasional domestic disputes in the quiet town. This was different. "How long do you think it's been down there?" she asked Marcus, who had stayed to answer questions. "Hard to say. The daycare closed in '98, but the sandbox was accessible until they boarded everything up around 2005 or so," he replied. "The clothes look 80s or early 90s to me." Detective Mercer nodded, making notes. "Did you attend this daycare?" "Yes, as a kid, from about 85 to 90. "And you don't remember anything unusual, any children who went missing, any strange incidents?" Marcus shook his head. "Nothing like that. It was just a normal daycare. Miss Patricia ran a tight ship. Parents trusted her completely." As word spread through the small town, residents began to gather at the edge of the police tape, whispering theories to each other. Old memories were being re-examined in light of the disturbing discovery. The locket and photograph were sent to the state crime lab, while the mannequin itself was carefully documented and then transported to the police station. Detective Mercer began the painstaking process of reviewing missing persons cases from the region, focusing on the 1980s and 1990s. 3 days later, she received her first real lead. The crime lab had found traces of DNA on the inside of the locket, skin cells preserved in the protected environment. They were running it through databases, but results would take time. Meanwhile, Detective Mercer interviewed former employees of Little Explorers. Most remembered a pleasant workplace, though several mentioned Miss Patricia's occasional odd behaviors. She kept records of everything, said Diane Wilkins, who had worked as an assistant at the daycare from 1987 to 1992. Not just the official attendance and emergency contact forms. She had notebooks where she'd write down observations about each child, what they ate, who they played with, even phrases they said that she found interesting. "Did you ever find that strange?" Detective Mercer asked. Diane hesitated. At the time, I thought she was just being thorough, but looking back, sometimes she'd get fixated on certain children, especially the quiet ones or the ones who seemed, I don't know, vulnerable somehow. Another former employee, Robert Torres, had more troubling recollections. There was this storage closet in the back of the building. Miss Patricia kept it locked at all times, said it was for cleaning supplies, but none of us staff ever saw inside. One time I was working late and I heard her in there, talking to someone, but when she came out, she was alone. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Detective Mercer located Miss Patricia Holloway. Contrary to what many in town believed, the former daycare owner hadn't passed away. She was living in a nursing home in Columbus, about 60 miles away. At 87, she suffered from advanced dementia, her once sharp mind now clouded and confused. Detective Mercer visited her anyway, hoping for a moment of clarity. Miss Patricia sat in a wheelchair by a window, her once neatly pinned hair now wild and white. Her eyes, however, still held a certain intensity. "Miss Patricia," Detective Mercer said gently, sitting beside her, "I'd like to ask you about little explorers, about something we found in the sandbox." For several minutes, Miss Patricia stared blankly, then suddenly her eyes focused. "The turtle keeps them safe," she whispered. "Keeps who safe, Miss Patricia?" "The special ones, the ones who need protecting." "From what? Who needed protection?" Miss Patricia's gaze drifted back to the window. From their fathers, their mothers, the ones who hurt them. A chill ran through Detective Mercer. "Did you put the mannequin in the sandbox, Miss Patricia?" The elderly woman smiled faintly. "He's not there anymore. He got away. They all got away." "Who got away?" "The children." But Miss Patricia had retreated back into her confused state, mumbling about cookie recipes and naptime schedules. The brief window of clarity had closed. Back in Millfield, the DNA results from the locket finally came in. They matched a cold case from 1989, 7-year-old Christopher Allen, who had disappeared while walking home from school in Lancaster, a town about 30 miles from Millfield. His case had never been solved, though investigators at the time had focused on his father, who had a history of domestic violence. The father had eventually moved away, remarried, and died in 2011. Christopher Allen had attended Little Explorers for 2 years before his disappearance. A search warrant was executed for Miss Patricia's personal storage unit, which her great-niece had been paying for since the older woman entered the nursing home. Inside, investigators found dozens of notebooks meticulously documenting children who had attended the daycare. Certain names were highlighted with additional notes in the margins: bruises on arms, flinches when touched, mother seems unstable. More disturbingly, they found a box containing small items: a child's hair ribbon, a tiny sock, a plastic superhero figure, a baby tooth. Each was labeled with a child's name and date, and at the bottom of the box a collection of torn photographs, the missing halves to the one found in the locket. As Detective Mercer pieced together the evidence, a disturbing picture began to emerge. It appeared that Miss Patricia, the trusted caregiver, had developed her own twisted system of protection. When she identified children she believed were being abused, she would document, observe, and collect mementos. The torn photographs seemed to be a ritual of sorts, tearing the child away from their perceived abuser. But the mannequin remained the most disturbing element. Was it a stand-in for Christopher Allen, a memorial, or something more sinister? The case took yet another turn when Robert Torres, the former employee, came forward with additional information. "I remembered something else," he told Detective Mercer. "There was a period in the late 80s when Miss Patricia became obsessed with doll making. She took classes, said it was therapeutic." The investigation expanded to include other properties Miss Patricia had owned or had access to. On a small plot of land outside town that had belonged to her brother, cadaver dogs indicated multiple potential sites of interest. As excavation began, the town of Millfield held its collective breath. What they found wasn't bodies, but more mannequins. 6 in total, each dressed in children's clothing from different eras, each containing a locket with a torn photograph. Each mannequin had been carefully buried, placed in a protective container that had preserved them from the elements. The photographs were matched to missing children's cases from across 3 decades. All had connections to Little Explorers daycare. All had documented histories of suspected abuse or neglect. All cases remained unsolved. Miss Patricia passed away in her sleep before she could be formally interviewed again. She took with her the full truth of what had happened to those children, why she had created the mannequins, and what they truly represented. The remains of Christopher Allen and the other missing children were never found. To this day in Millfield, Ohio, parents hold their children a little closer. The new community center built on the site of Little Explorers stands bright and modern, with no turtle sandbox in sight. But longtime residents avoid the corner of the property where the sandbox once stood, and on quiet nights, some swear they can hear the faint laughter of children who never grew up. The mannequins remain in police evidence storage, their half-smiling faces and hollow chests a testament to secrets still buried, to questions that may never be answered. And somewhere, perhaps, the missing children, or what's left of them, wait to be found. Some in town believe Miss Patricia was a protector who documented abuse when no one would listen. Others think she was something far more sinister, a predator hiding behind a grandmother's smile. The truth, like the torn photographs, remains incomplete, half seen, half hidden, forever divided between light and shadow. Crime 6, contractors were repairing a cracked floor when they struck metal. It was a bolted safe embedded in the foundation, no dial, no markings. When they pried it open, they found bones, newspaper clippings, and a school ID badge. The name had been scratched out, but the photo was unmistakable. It was her. The house at 1437 Pinewood Drive in Oak Ridge, Wisconsin, had stood for nearly 40 years. Built in 1983 by Raymond Mercer, a local contractor with a reputation for quality work, the modest split-level home had changed hands just 3 times in its existence. The current owners, Daniel and Sarah Whitman, had purchased the property in November of 2019, charmed by its mature trees and quiet cul-de-sac location. They were a young couple with dreams of starting a family, and the extra bedroom would be perfect for a nursery someday. They'd lived there for almost 2 years before noticing the subtle depression in the concrete floor of the basement utility room. It wasn't dramatic, just a hairline crack that seemed to be spreading, with one side sinking perhaps a 1/4 inch lower than the other. Daniel mentioned it to his father during a Sunday visit, who suggested they have it checked before winter set in. Frost heaves could make it worse, he warned. In late September 2021, Larson Brothers Construction arrived to investigate. Joey Larson, the younger of the brothers, was using a concrete saw to cut around the affected area when his blade hit something metallic about 4 inches below the surface. What they uncovered shocked everyone present: a rectangular metal box roughly 2 feet by 3 feet, deliberately encased in the concrete foundation. "I've seen wall safes, floor safes, but never anything embedded this deep in a foundation," Mark Larson would later tell Detective Andrea Martinez. "It was weird from the get-go. No combination dial, no keyhole, just heavy gauge steel with industrial bolts. Took us almost an hour with power tools to get it open." Inside the crude safe lay a collection of items that would launch an investigation spanning back 3 decades. A small bundle of human finger bones, yellowed newspaper clippings about missing persons cases from the 1990s, a tarnished silver pendant in the shape of a cross, and most disturbingly, a laminated school identification card from Oak Ridge High School. The photo showed a smiling teenage girl with feathered brown hair and bright eyes. The name portion had been deliberately scratched away with what appeared to be a sharp object, leaving only unreadable gouges in the plastic. But longtime residents of Oak Ridge recognized her immediately. It was Elaine Kowalski. She had vanished without a trace in May of 1992, just 3 weeks before her high school graduation. Detective Martinez was 43 and had grown up in Oak Ridge. She remembered the Kowalski case, though she had been only 14 when it happened. Everyone remembered. It was the kind of disappearance that changed a community forever, installing locks on doors that had previously remained open and ending the era when parents allowed children to roam freely until sunset. Martinez pulled the original case files from storage, 11 boxes of interview transcripts, tip sheets, and investigative reports that had ultimately led nowhere. The facts were simple but maddening. 17-year-old Elaine had attended swim team practice after school on May 4, 1992. Security footage showed her leaving the building at 5:47 p.m. She never made it home. Her book bag was found the next morning in Henderson Park, about half a mile from the school, contents undisturbed except for her house keys, which were missing. No signs of struggle, no witnesses who saw anything unusual. Her parents, both teachers at the middle school, had no enemies anyone knew of. Elaine herself was well-liked, a solid B student with a boyfriend who had an airtight alibi. He had been at baseball practice, confirmed by 20 teammates and 2 coaches. For weeks, the town had searched. Flyers with Elaine's photo covered every telephone pole and store window. News vans from Milwaukee and even Chicago crowded the small police station parking lot. But as summer stretched on, the media left. The posters faded or were taken down. Life in Oak Ridge attempted to return to normal, though a collective unease lingered beneath the surface. The original lead detective, Thomas Grayson, had retired in 2008 and died of a heart attack in 2015. But his notes were meticulous, and Martinez spent days absorbing every detail. One name appeared repeatedly in the margins of Grayson's personal notebook: Raymond Mercer. The same Raymond Mercer who had built the house on Pinewood Drive. Mercer had been questioned 3 times. He had done some renovation work at the Kowalski home the previous year, building a deck and repairing their garage. Nothing in the official report suggested he was a serious suspect, but Grayson's private notes told a different story. Mercer nervous during questioning, read one entry. Claims alibi of working alone at new construction site unverifiable. Another note dated almost a year after Elaine's disappearance. Mercer's second wife reports strange behavior around anniversary of K case. Requested surveillance denied, insufficient cause. Martinez drove to the address listed for Mercer in the old files. The small ranch house appeared vacant, mail overflowing from the box. Neighbors told her Mercer had moved to Florida sometime in 2018 following his second divorce. His current whereabouts were unknown. The bones from the safe were sent to the state crime lab. DNA testing confirmed they belonged to a female, likely between the ages of 15 and 20. But extracting a usable DNA profile proved difficult due to the age and condition of the remains. The cross pendant was identified as belonging to Elaine by her mother, now 78 and living in a nursing home with advancing dementia. On good days, she could recall her daughter's smile. On bad days, she still set a place for Elaine at imaginary dinner tables. The newspaper clippings presented another disturbing angle. They weren't all about Elaine. 3 other missing persons cases were represented. 2 teenage girls from neighboring counties who had disappeared in 1989 and 1994, and a 26-year-old woman from Milwaukee who vanished in 1995. All remained unsolved. Martinez assembled a timeline. Raymond Mercer had built the house on Pinewood Drive in 1983, long before any of the disappearances. But property records showed he had retained ownership, renting it out until 1998 when he sold it to a retired couple named Simmons. During those years, Mercer would have had access to the house. The safe could have been installed at any point during that 15-year window. More disturbingly, Martinez discovered that Mercer's construction company had done work in all 3 communities where the other missing women had lived. In one case, they had repaved the parking lot of the shopping center where 19-year-old Bethany Collins was last seen in October 1994. Former employees of Mercer Construction were tracked down and interviewed. Most remembered him as a fair boss, if somewhat temperamental. One former administrative assistant recalled his peculiar reaction when the office TV showed a news update about the search for Elaine Kowalski. He just stood there staring at her picture on the screen, the woman told Martinez. When I said something like, "So sad about that girl," he snapped at me to get back to work. It stuck with me because it seemed so cold. The investigation hit a critical turning point when Martinez located Mercer's second ex-wife, Patricia, living in Arizona. Their conversation revealed a man different from his public persona. Ray had these episodes, Patricia explained over the phone. He'd wake up screaming sometimes. Once I found him in the basement at 3 in the morning, just sitting in the dark. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was making sure everything stayed where it belonged. I didn't think much of it then. Now I wonder. She also revealed that Mercer had kept a locked footlocker that she was never allowed to open. After their divorce, the locker disappeared. Martinez organized a methodical search of other properties built or renovated by Mercer Construction between 1985 and 1998. Ground-penetrating radar identified anomalies at 2 locations. Excavation of the first site revealed nothing unusual, just a buried layer of construction debris. The second site, however, yielded another safe, this one containing a woman's wristwatch and a single earring. Forensic testing would later match the items to Bethany Collins. Raymond Mercer was located in a small coastal town in Florida in January 2022. When local police arrived at his rented duplex to question him, they found him unresponsive on the bathroom floor. The medical examiner would determine he had ingested a lethal combination of alcohol and prescription medication. Beside him lay a handwritten note that contained only 5 words. They were all my foundations. The case remains officially open. DNA testing continues on the partial remains found in both safes in hopes of identifying all victims. The families of the missing women have found a strange comfort in finally having answers, however incomplete and disturbing they may be. The house on Pinewood Drive stands empty now. The Whitmans moved out shortly after the discovery, unable to sleep peacefully knowing what had been hidden beneath them all along. Occasionally, curious teenagers drive by slowly, pointing at the place where a killer hid his trophies in plain sight for decades. In Oak Ridge, longtime residents still remember Elaine Kowalski's smile. They remember how the town used to be before she vanished. Some say they've finally found closure. Others note that closure feels much different than they imagined, not a sense of peace, but rather the quiet discomfort of learning that monsters don't just lurk in shadows. Sometimes they build the very homes we live in. Crime 7, the small town of Meridian Creek, Massachusetts, rarely saw much excitement beyond the occasional high school football championship or seasonal festival. Located just far enough from Boston to maintain its quaint New England character, it was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and everyone knew everyone else's business. Rebecca Harmon had lived there her entire life. At 32, she worked as a librarian at the local branch, a job that suited her quiet, methodical nature. Her colleagues described her as reliable, if somewhat reserved. She lived alone in a modest two-bedroom house on Elm Street, inherited from her grandmother 5 years earlier. The neighbors would occasionally see her tending to her garden or walking to work, always with a polite smile but rarely stopping for extended conversation. What most people didn't know about Rebecca was her passion for collecting vintage electronics. Her basement housed an impressive array of record players, early model computers, and radios from various decades. It was a hobby she had developed during college, finding comfort in objects that had witnessed fragments of history. On the first Saturday of June 2023, Rebecca attended a community-wide garage sale, an annual tradition in Meridian Creek. The day was pleasantly warm, with a light breeze carrying the scent of freshly cut grass through the neighborhood. She had already visited several houses, purchasing a few old books and a ceramic vase, when she arrived at the Millers' property on the outskirts of town. The Millers had recently moved in after purchasing the home from the estate of Harold Kemp, an elderly man who had passed away 3 months earlier. Among the items they were selling was an old tube radio, a Philco model from the 1940s with a worn wooden case but intact dials and knobs. "We found it in the attic," Mrs. Miller explained. "Don't know if it works, but it looks like a nice antique piece." Rebecca examined it carefully, running her fingers along the aged wood. Something about it appealed to her immediately. She purchased it for $20 and carried it home, pleased with her find. That evening, after cleaning the dust from its surface, she plugged it in. The vacuum tubes warmed slowly, casting a faint amber glow in her dimly lit living room. She turned the dial, expecting to hear perhaps some static or, if lucky, a distant station. What she heard instead was a wash of white noise across every frequency except one. At 87.3 FM, through the static, a voice spoke a single word, repeated at 10-second intervals. Harmon, her last name. Rebecca initially assumed it was coincidence, perhaps a radio advertisement for a local business with the same name. She continued turning the dial, but every other position yielded nothing but static. Returning to 87.3, the voice continued its monotonous repetition. Harmon, Harmon, Harmon. The voice was neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It possessed a flatness that made it seem almost mechanical, yet with subtle inflections that suggested something human. When she unplugged the radio, something peculiar happened. The voice continued. The amber glow of the tubes persisted. Rebecca stood motionless for several seconds, watching the unplugged cord hanging from her hand. "This isn't possible," she whispered to herself. She plugged it back in, then unplugged it again. The radio continued functioning without power. She examined it more closely, searching for batteries or some hidden power source, but found nothing unusual except for a small serial number etched on the bottom, KM6487. Over the next few days, Rebecca became increasingly unsettled. The radio continued its eerie broadcast regardless of whether it was plugged in. She placed it in her basement among her other collectibles, but even through the closed door and up the stairs, she could faintly hear the repetition of her name. At work, she began researching the radio model and its history. The Philco 46-50 had been a popular model in the post-war era, but nothing in its specifications suggested anything unusual. On her lunch break, she called the Millers to ask about the previous owner. Harold was a bit of a recluse, Mr. Miller told her. The neighbors said he rarely left the house in his final years. Used to work for some government research facility back in the 60s, I think. Rebecca decided to visit the county records office to learn more about Harold Kemp. The clerk, an older woman named Doris who had known Rebecca since childhood, helped her locate the information. Harold Kemp, Doris read from the screen. Born 1932, died February 9, 2023. Worked at the Sanderson Research Institute from 1958 to 1987. She looked up. That place closed down years ago. It was some kind of military contractor, if I remember correctly. On her way home, Rebecca felt a growing sense of unease. The radio's voice seemed to have increased in volume when she entered her house that evening. She went directly to the basement and stood before it, listening to the relentless repetition of her name. "What do you want?" she asked aloud, feeling foolish for addressing an inanimate object. The radio continued its monotonous broadcast, unaltered. That night, Rebecca dreamt of endless corridors lined with radios, all broadcasting her name in perfect synchronization. She woke at 3:17 a.m., sweating despite the cool air from her open window. From the basement, the radio's voice seemed to have gained clarity. The next day, Rebecca called in sick to work. She spent the morning searching online for information about the Sanderson Research Institute. Most of the results were vague references in historical documents about government contracts during the Cold War. One article mentioned experiments in long-range communications and signal persistence, though the details were sparse. At noon, she received an unexpected visitor. Martin Kemp, Harold's son, stood on her porch looking uncomfortable. "The Millers mentioned you bought my father's radio," he said after introducing himself. I think I should warn you about it." Rebecca invited him in, noticing how his eyes darted nervously around her living room. "My father was obsessed with that radio toward the end," Martin explained, declining her offer of coffee. "He claimed it spoke to him. We all thought it was dementia." "What did it say to him?" Rebecca asked, her mouth suddenly dry. "His name, just his name, over and over." Martin looked down at his hands. "The night before he died, he called me frantic, said the radio had stopped saying Kemp and started saying something else." "What was it saying instead?" Rebecca whispered, though she already knew the answer. "Harmon," Martin met her eyes. "He said it was saying Harmon over and over. I thought he was confused. But then I remembered my father knew a woman named Catherine Harmon at Sanderson. They worked together on some project he would never discuss." Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. Catherine Harmon. Yes, my aunt mentioned her once, said she and my father had some kind of falling out in the early 80s. Catherine died in 1987, allegedly suicide. 2 days later, Rebecca visited the local newspaper's archives. With the help of a journalist friend, she located an obituary for Catherine Harmon, dated August 17, 1987. The sparse text mentioned she was survived by a sister, Elizabeth, and a niece, Rebecca's mother. Catherine Harmon had been Rebecca's great-aunt, a relative never mentioned in family conversations. When she confronted her mother with this information during a tense phone call, the response was a long silence followed by a shaky sigh. "We never talked about Aunt Catherine," her mother finally said. "There was some scandal at her work. Dad said she got involved in something dangerous, something that broke her mind." Rebecca pressed for more details, but her mother claimed ignorance. "All I know is that when they found her, there was a radio playing beside her body. The police report said it was unplugged." The following week, Rebecca received an anonymous envelope containing a single document, a partial report from the Sanderson Research Institute, dated June 1982. Most of it had been redacted, but one paragraph remained clear. Project Echo has demonstrated unexpected persistence in subjects K and H signal continuation observed without conventional power sources. Broadcast limited to subject identifiers. Recommend immediate termination of all trials and containment of existing units. The document was signed C. Harmon and stamped classified. Rebecca spent the next several nights researching what might allow a radio to function without power, finding nothing but fringe theories and pseudoscience. The voice from the basement continued its monotonous broadcast, a constant reminder of the mystery she couldn't solve. On the 30th day after purchasing the radio, Rebecca woke to silence. The voice had stopped. She approached the radio cautiously, noticing that the amber glow of the tubes had dimmed significantly. As she stood before it, the static cleared momentarily, and the voice spoke, not her name this time, but a complete sentence. "Find subject K79, signal transfer complete." Then the radio went dark, truly powerless for the first time since she had brought it home. 3 days later, Rebecca received a letter from a law firm representing the estate of a distant relative she had never heard of, a woman named Karen Mercer, who had died the same morning the radio had gone silent. The letter indicated that Ms. Mercer had left Rebecca a single item, a vintage television set from the 1950s. The serial number noted in the inventory was KM6488. The television was scheduled to arrive the following week. Rebecca still hadn't decided if she would accept the delivery. The radio remained silent in her basement, its purpose apparently fulfilled. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, Rebecca thought she could hear the faintest whisper from upstairs, where no electronic devices were plugged in. It sounded like someone saying a name, not hers this time. "A different one. Waiting." Crime 8, the town of Millfield, Pennsylvania, was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked, not because they were careless, but because nothing ever happened there that would make them think twice about it. It was the kind of place where the local newspaper's front page might feature stories about charity bake sales or the high school football team's latest victory. That's why what happened to Rachel Winters in the fall of 2018 sent ripples through the community that are still felt today. Rachel was 32, recently married to her college sweetheart Michael, and 3 months pregnant with their first child. She was the kind of woman who planned everything meticulously, from weekly meal preparations to nursery color schemes. Her sister Elaine had given her a baby monitor as a hand-me-down after her own children had outgrown it. Just to test it out, Elaine had said with a knowing smile. Rachel, ever the planner, had set it up in the small room that would eventually become the nursery, though it was still mostly empty except for a few boxes and an old wooden rocking chair that had belonged to Rachel's grandmother. October in Millfield brought crisp air and early sunsets. Rachel had developed a habit of waking up around 3 in the morning, pregnancy insomnia, her doctor called it. On the night of October 17th, she woke as usual and reached for her phone on the nightstand. The screen illuminated her face in the darkness as she checked the time, 3:07 a.m. Michael slept soundly beside her, his breathing deep and rhythmic. Something caught her eye. The baby monitor app on her phone was active. She hadn't opened it, but there it was, showing the nursery in night vision mode. The room looked as it always did, except for one detail that made Rachel's blood run cold. The rocking chair, which Michael had moved to the attic the previous weekend to make room for painting supplies, was back in the nursery, and it was rocking slowly, deliberately, as if someone invisible sat upon it. Rachel blinked hard, convinced she was still half asleep and imagining things. But when she looked again, the chair continued its gentle motion. And then, at the edge of the frame, a shadow moved, distinctly human-shaped, but obscured by the monitor's limited field of vision. "Michael," she whispered, shaking her husband's shoulder. He mumbled something incomprehensible before rolling over. "Michael, please wake up," she insisted, her voice trembling. He finally opened his eyes, squinting at the panic on his wife's face. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately alert. Rachel wordlessly handed him the phone. The chair had stopped rocking, but the shadow remained, now seemingly standing beside it. "Stay here," Michael said firmly, reaching for the baseball bat they kept under the bed, a concession to Rachel's occasional anxiety about living in their first house, despite Millfield's safe reputation. As Michael crept down the hallway toward the nursery, Rachel called 911 with shaking hands. The operator's calm voice asked standard questions that Rachel could barely process. Her eyes remained fixed on the phone screen, where the shadow had now disappeared from view. The police arrived within 8 minutes, fast for rural Pennsylvania. Officer Dennis Hayward and his partner, Officer Julia Chen, searched the house thoroughly, finding no sign of an intruder. The nursery appeared untouched. The rocking chair was indeed in the attic where Michael had left it. The windows were locked from the inside. The doors showed no signs of forced entry. "Maybe it was just a glitch in the monitor," Officer Chen suggested gently after they'd completed their search. "These devices can malfunction sometimes." But Rachel knew what she had seen, and when the officers left, promising to patrol the area for the remainder of the night, she remained awake, staring at the ceiling, one hand protectively covering her belly. The next morning, Michael called Elaine to ask about the monitor. "It worked fine for us," Elaine said. "We've had it for 3 years. Why? Is something wrong with it?" Michael hesitated before explaining what had happened. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "That's strange," Elaine finally said, "but you know what? Now that you mention it, Tyler did say something odd once." Tyler was Elaine's 4-year-old son. "He said he saw a man in his room through the monitor. We thought he was just having nightmares." Detective Marcus Reeves was assigned to the case after Rachel insisted on filing a formal report. A 20-year veteran with tired eyes but an attentive demeanor, Reeves was known for his thoroughness. He examined the baby monitor, an angel care model that was popular a few years back. "We'll have our tech team look at this," he said, placing the device in an evidence bag. "In the meantime, I'd like to install some temporary cameras around your property, if that's all right with you." Rachel and Michael agreed immediately. For 3 nights, nothing happened. The cameras recorded only the occasional raccoon or neighborhood cat prowling the yard. Rachel began to wonder if she had imagined the whole thing, pregnancy hormones playing tricks on her perception. Then on the 4th night at exactly 3:07 a.m., the cameras in the nursery picked up an anomaly. The temperature dropped suddenly by 15 degrees. The digital thermometer in the room recorded the change, and though the rocking chair remained in the attic, the cameras captured what appeared to be a depression in the carpet, circular indentations forming and releasing as if invisible chair legs were pressing down and lifting. Detective Reeves reviewed the footage the next morning, his expression unreadable. "I've seen a lot in my career," he said carefully, "but this is unusual." He expanded his investigation, looking into the history of the house. Built in 1973, it had changed hands 7 times before the Winters purchased it. Nothing in its history suggested anything untoward. No deaths on the property, no reported crimes. Then Reeves had an idea. He tracked down the Angel Care Monitor's previous owners, not just Elaine and her family, but the family they had purchased it from at a yard sale. The Kelly family had moved away from Millfield 2 years earlier, relocating to Ohio for work. When Reeves called them, Mrs. Kelly's voice became strained when he mentioned the monitor. "We got rid of that thing because it kept showing things that weren't there," she said hesitantly. "My husband thought it was interference from another device, but what, Mrs. Kelly?" "Our daughter said she saw a man watching her through it. We thought it was just her imagination." Reeves dug deeper. The monitor had been purchased new by the Kellys 4 years ago. The detective contacted Angel Care's customer service, inquiring if there had been any similar reports about that model. The representative was unhelpful at first, citing company policy against discussing product issues. But when Reeves mentioned potential police involvement, she reluctantly admitted there had been a small batch with technical issues that caused cross-frequency interference. "Sometimes they would pick up feeds from other monitors in the neighborhood," she explained. But the Winters' closest neighbors were a quarter-mile away, and they had no young children. As weeks passed, Rachel became increasingly anxious. The incidents continued sporadically, always at 3:07 a.m., always lasting exactly 6 minutes. Sometimes it was just the temperature drop. Sometimes shadows would move across the room. Once, the camera captured what looked like fingerprints appearing on the window glass from the inside. Michael installed additional locks on the doors and windows. They considered moving, but with Rachel now 5 months pregnant and their finances stretched thin from the house purchase, it wasn't a realistic option. Detective Reeves expanded his investigation to include research into the land before the house was built. What he discovered sent a chill down his spine. Prior to 1973, the land had been part of a larger property owned by the Millfield Psychiatric Hospital, which had closed down in the late 1960s after a series of patient abuse scandals. The area where the Winters' house now stood had once contained a small outbuilding used for storage, and occasionally, according to one former orderly Reeves tracked down, as an unofficial isolation area for particularly difficult patients. There was this one patient, the elderly former orderly recalled during their interview at his nursing home. James Corwin suffered from severe schizophrenia. He'd rock for hours in a chair, muttering to himself, always fixated on the time, 3 o'clock specifically. Said that's when they would come for him. Corwin had died in 1968 at the age of 34 from self-inflicted injuries. According to hospital records, he had been found at 3:07 a.m. When Reeves shared this information with the Winters, Rachel felt a strange mixture of validation and terror. There was an explanation, however unsettling. The detective recommended they consult with Dr. Alina Hayes, a professor of environmental psychology at the local community college. Dr. Hayes specialized in how physical spaces affect human perception and had consulted on several cases involving what she called environmental suggestion, the way certain locations can influence people to experience similar phenomena. Our minds are constantly looking for patterns, Dr. Hayes explained during her visit to the house. And sometimes when we know about a space's history, we subconsciously create experiences that align with that knowledge. But Rachel hadn't known about James Corwin or the land's history when she first saw the rocking chair through the monitor. As her due date approached, the incidents began to decrease in frequency. By her 8th month of pregnancy, they had stopped entirely. The nursery, now fully decorated with pale yellow walls and woodland creature decals, remained peaceful. The rocking chair, thoroughly checked by Detective Reeves and found to be just an ordinary chair, was brought down from the attic and placed in the corner of the room. Emma Winters was born on April 12, 2019, healthy, with strong lungs and her mother's eyes. The first few weeks passed in a blur of midnight feedings and diaper changes. Rachel and Michael were exhausted but happy. They used a different baby monitor, a new model, purchased from a big box store. It was Emma's 3rd week home when Rachel woke suddenly in the night. She checked the time, 3:07 a.m. A cold feeling spread through her chest as she reached for the new monitor. The screen showed Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib. The rocking chair was still. Then, as Rachel watched, a shadow fell across the crib. The temperature display dropped rapidly, and in the background, barely audible over the monitor's speaker, came the sound of soft, rhythmic creaking, like someone gently rocking in a chair. Detective Reeves' case file on the Winters remains open but inactive. The family moved away from Millfield less than a month after Emma's birth, leaving no forwarding address. The house remained on the market for 3 years before finally selling at a significantly reduced price. The new owners, a young couple from Philadelphia looking for a quieter life, report no unusual occurrences. They have no children and no baby monitors. They did, however, remove the old flooring in what had been the nursery, discovering during renovations that beneath the carpet lay scratched wooden floorboards. And in one corner where the rocking chair had stood, the marks were particularly deep, as if something had been rocking there for a very, very long time. Crime 9, the residents of Cedar Mill, Oregon, would later say that autumn came early that year. By mid-September, the maple trees lining Elmwood Drive had already begun their transformation, painting the quiet suburban street in hues of amber and crimson. It was against this backdrop that Meredith Lane's life would quietly unravel, thread by imperceptible thread, until nothing remained but questions. Meredith was 34 when she disappeared. A dental hygienist at Westside Family Dentistry, she had worked there for nearly a decade. Colleagues described her as meticulous and kind, the type who remembered patients' birthdays and kept a drawer of small toys for nervous children. Her attention to detail made her exceptional at her work, but those who knew her well understood this quality extended far beyond her professional life. She was a creature of habit, her younger sister Abigail would later tell Detective James Harmon. Meredith's life ran on schedules and routines. It wasn't just organization, it was how she found security. This rigidity of routine could be traced back to their childhood. Their father, a lieutenant colonel in the Army, had moved the family across 7 states before Meredith turned 12. Each new town, each new school meant rebuilding from scratch. While Abigail had adapted with the resilience of youth, Meredith had sought refuge in predictability, in the elements of life she could control. By all accounts, September 23rd began as any other Tuesday in Meredith's carefully structured life. She woke at 5:45 a.m., completed her 30-minute yoga routine, showered, dressed, and prepared her usual breakfast of steel-cut oats with blueberries. At 7:10 a.m., she left her modest one-bedroom apartment, locked the door twice, a habit her mother had instilled, and drove the 12 minutes to work. The morning passed without incident. Meredith saw 4 patients before lunch, a routine cleaning for Mrs. Abernathy, a filling for young Tommy Ramirez, and consultations with the Johnsons, who were new to the practice. During her lunch break, she ate her packed meal, a kale salad with grilled chicken, while catching up on paperwork. Her afternoon schedule included 3 more patients, ending with a 4:30 p.m. appointment that concluded early. Around 5:15 p.m., Meredith texted her sister, "Heading home, still on for dinner Thursday." Abigail responded with a thumbs-up emoji. This would be the last communication anyone would receive from Meredith Lane. At 5:43 p.m., security cameras at Parkway Grocers 2 blocks from her apartment captured Meredith selecting items from the produce section: cherry tomatoes, a cucumber, a bundle of fresh basil. The store's transaction records show her checkout time as 6:12 p.m. The cashier, 19-year-old Ellie Winters, remembered nothing unusual about their brief interaction. She seemed normal, maybe quieter than usual, but it was the end of the day, you know. People are tired. What happened after Meredith left Parkway Grocers remains the central mystery. Her apartment was approximately 7 minutes away by foot. The weather was mild, partly cloudy, with no rain. The route took her down well-populated streets, still busy with early evening activity. Yet somehow in that short distance, Meredith Lane vanished. When she failed to appear at work the following morning, something that had never happened in her 9 years of employment, Dr. Wesley, the practice owner, called her cell phone. When that went unanswered, he called her emergency contact, Abigail. "I knew immediately something was wrong," Abigail would later recall. Meredith wouldn't just not show up. Even if she were deathly ill, she would have called. That's who she was. Abigail drove to her sister's apartment, using the spare key Meredith had given her for emergencies only. What she found inside deepened her concern rather than alleviating it. Everything was in its place, almost unnaturally so. The bed was made with hospital corners. Dishes were washed and put away. Even the refrigerator was organized by food groups and expiration dates. On the kitchen counter sat Meredith's grocery bag from the previous evening. The items had been removed but not put away, the tomatoes, cucumber, and basil resting on the cutting board as if awaiting preparation. Beside them lay Meredith's phone, wallet, and keys. It looked like she had just stepped away for a moment, Abigail told police. Like she might walk back in any second and apologize for keeping me waiting. But Meredith didn't walk back in, not that day, nor any day that followed. The investigation began as a missing persons case, but several elements quickly raised concerns. Detective Harmon noted three troubling inconsistencies in his initial report. First, Meredith had left behind all personal identification and means of communication. Second, there were no signs of forced entry or struggle within the apartment. Third, and perhaps most baffling, was the security camera footage from the apartment building's lobby. The cameras showed Meredith entering the building at 6:21 p.m., grocery bag in hand. She collected her mail, exchanged pleasant greetings with Mrs. Delacroix from apartment 3C, and took the elevator to the fourth floor. After that, nothing. No footage of her leaving the building that night or any subsequent day. It was as if Meredith Lane had simply dissolved into the walls of her apartment building. As days stretched into weeks, the investigation expanded. Volunteers combed nearby parks and wooded areas. Divers searched the Willamette River. Meredith's dental records and DNA were entered into national databases. Her bank accounts remained untouched. Her car sat in its designated parking space, collecting autumn leaves on its windshield. The case might have gradually faded from public attention if not for what happened 6 weeks after Meredith's disappearance. Lydia Garner, a package delivery driver, was dropping off a parcel at the apartment building when she noticed something unusual. A woman's leather wallet placed neatly on the lobby bench. Inside was Meredith Lane's driver's license, credit cards, and $43 in cash. But it was the handwritten note tucked into the billfold that sent a chill through Detective Harmon when it landed on his desk. Written in what handwriting analysts would later confirm was Meredith's own distinctive penmanship were the words, "I'm still here, look closer." The note transformed the investigation. Forensic teams returned to the apartment building, this time examining every inch from the basement storage units to the rarely accessed maintenance corridors. Residents were re-interviewed, their apartments searched with permission. Building blueprints were studied for hidden spaces or inconsistencies. Nothing. Then came the second note, 3 months after Meredith's disappearance. This one was found by 13-year-old Tyler Reed while walking his dog in the park across from Meredith's apartment building. Sealed in a Ziploc bag and partially buried beneath a distinctive oak tree was a page torn from what appeared to be a journal. The handwriting matched Meredith's. The spaces between walls hold more than insulation. I can hear them all around me now, moving, watching. I should have noticed sooner. Psychological profiles of Meredith were reassessed. Had investigators missed signs of mental illness, paranoia, schizophrenia, but interviews with her therapist, whom she saw monthly for mild anxiety, colleagues and family revealed no indications of psychosis or delusional thinking. She was one of my most grounded patients, Dr. Alina Phillips stated. If anything, Meredith's issues stemmed from excessive rationality, difficulty letting go of control, trouble with uncertainty. The case took another puzzling turn when maintenance workers at Meredith's apartment building discovered unusual modifications to the wall between her bedroom and the neighboring unit. A small section of drywall had been carefully cut and replaced, concealed behind Meredith's dresser. Forensic analysis revealed the work had been done recently, within months of her disappearance, but fingerprints on the materials matched neither Meredith nor any known subjects in the database. The neighboring apartment had been vacant for 3 months prior to Meredith's disappearance, with new tenants, the Crawfords, a young couple from Seattle, moving in just 2 weeks after she vanished. Their background check revealed nothing suspicious, and they appeared genuinely disturbed by the discoveries. As the 1-year anniversary of Meredith's disappearance approached, interest in the case resurged. A true crime podcast dedicated 3 episodes to exploring various theories. Internet sleuths pored over every available detail. The most persistent theory suggested that Meredith had discovered something in her building, perhaps related to the wall modifications, and either fled out of fear or met with foul play. Then, 18 months after she vanished, Abigail received a birthday card in the mail. Inside, written in handwriting that made her hands tremble, was a message. "I've learned to live between the lines now, Abby. Some doors aren't meant to be opened, but I opened one anyway. I'm not coming back, but I'm not gone either. Don't look for me in the wrong places." No fingerprints were found on the card except Abigail's own. The postmark showed it had been mailed from Cedar Mill, just blocks from Meredith's apartment building. Detective Harmon, now approaching retirement, keeps a copy of Meredith's file on his desk. When asked why this particular case haunts him, he doesn't hesitate. Most missing persons cases have logical explanations, even the ones we never solve. But Meredith's case defies logic. The evidence suggests she's both gone and still here, dead and alive, a rational woman who vanished irrationally. The residents of Cedar Mill continue their lives, but something has changed in the community's collective consciousness. People glance differently at the spaces between apartment buildings. They notice the thinness of walls, the darkness of maintenance corridors, the unseen spaces that exist alongside our visible world. And sometimes, late at night, residents of Meredith's building report hearing faint sounds in the walls, not the typical settling of an aging structure, but something more deliberate, more aware. As if someone is moving between rooms that don't appear on any floor plan. The case of Meredith Line remains officially open. Story 10. Once upon a time, there was a flicker, a mere glitch in the baby monitor's gentle feed. The mother in her cozy sanctuary brushed it off as mere interference from the night. But then the audio crackled, and a soft, mysterious voice whispered, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A shiver ran down her spine as her blood turned to ice. With a heart racing like a wild horse, she dashed to her son's room, only to find an empty crib awaiting her. The window stood closed, the door securely locked. The only oddity in the room was a stuffed rabbit laying on the floor, its glassy black eyes fixated on her. Rebecca's screams pierced the stillness of the night until her throat felt raw, echoing through the walls. The sympathetic neighbors heard her cries and swiftly summoned emergency aid. Upon arrival, the authorities found her cradling the stuffed rabbit, lost in a world of disbelief and anguish on the nursery floor. Samuel, the 4-month-old infant, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void of questions. The initial investigation led to a dead end. No signs of forced entry, no disturbance in the security system, only the enigmatic voice on the baby monitor. How could someone slip into a locked abode, snatch a child, and depart without a trace save for a displaced toy? Suspicion clouded Rebecca, especially with her strained marriage to Daniel, who was away on business at the time of the incident. Medical records unveiled her battle with postpartum depression, casting shadows of doubt upon her. Yet a peculiar revelation emerged amidst the chaos. Microscopic fibers foreign to the household were discovered on the nursery windowsill, fibers of a rare climbing rope, hinting at an intruder's skilled maneuver from the outside. Security footage unveiled a dark figure lurking in the shadows, and a footprint in the garden soil matched a specialized boot used by seasoned climbers. The focus shifted from Rebecca to Daniel, who returned bewildered and distressed from his trip. Unusual calluses on his hands hinted at his newfound hobby of rock climbing, raising eyebrows among the investigators. Financial transactions, mysterious phone calls, and a hidden second family painted a grim picture. As the case unraveled, the hacked baby monitor emerged as a pivotal piece of evidence, leading the investigators to a chilling revelation in a residential basement. Samuel was found in the care of a woman named Elaine, Daniel's first wife, who harbored a deep-seated longing for the child she had lost. The truth echoed through the courtroom, exposing a web of deceit and betrayal spun by Daniel and Elaine. Despite their denial, the evidence spoke volumes: fibers, footprints, encrypted messages, all pointing to their orchestrated plan. The haunting audio from the baby monitor reverberated through the trial, sealing their fates. Daniel's distinctive cough in the background of the recording placed him at the scene, unraveling the facade he had meticulously crafted. Justice prevailed as Daniel and Elaine faced the consequences of their heinous crimes, while Rebecca and Samuel embarked on a journey to heal and rebuild their shattered lives. The case left a lasting impact, prompting a reevaluation of security measures and technological vulnerabilities in homes across the nation. Samuel grew up oblivious to the night that changed their lives, while Rebecca safeguarded the stuffed rabbit, a silent witness to the darkness that unfolded. The baby monitor, though deceptive in its whispers, held the key to the truth that lurked in the shadows, a tale that defied expectations and left an indelible mark on those touched by its chilling saga. Story 11. She cleared the mist from the mirror, gazing at her reflection. Everything seemed normal: her face, her attire. Yet a sense of unease crept in. A flicker caught her eye, a movement not her own. When she turned, the reflection remained motionless, watching. Thus began the enigma of Rebecca Thorne, initiated by that eerie incident in her bathroom. The events that followed would baffle investigators and haunt a community for years to come. Rebecca resided solo in a modest apartment in a serene suburban locale. Known as methodical and reserved, she kept to herself while maintaining amicable relations with her neighbors. Her occupation as a data analyst for a mid-sized company filled her days with routine and precision. No one could have predicted she would find herself at the center of one of the decade's most perplexing criminal probes. Initially, peculiar occurrences seemed trivial. Objects in Rebecca's home were subtly rearranged, no items missing, just shifted. A mug on a different shelf, books reorganized, her toothbrush in an unfamiliar spot. She brushed off these anomalies as mere lapses in memory, attributing them to long hours spent immersed in work under harsh fluorescent lights, straining her eyes on spreadsheets until they blurred. Detective Marion Shaw first heard of the disturbances when Rebecca, after enduring weeks of such incidents, finally sought help from the authorities. The initial evaluation hinted at a mental health concern rather than criminal activity, a conclusion based on the absence of concrete evidence. Shaw documented the complaint, but deemed it a low-priority case among the stack of others. There was nothing tangible, Shaw later testified. No signs of forced entry, no missing items, just a woman feeling a sense of wrongness in her own home. The pivotal moment arrived with the incident involving the bathroom mirror. During her subsequent interaction with the police, Rebecca recounted the episode vividly, the unsettling sensation of her reflection moving independently, the constant feeling of being observed even in solitude. This time she presented proof, footage from a security camera she had installed, aimed at her front door. The recording unveiled a chilling revelation that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned officers. The grainy video depicted Rebecca leaving for work in the morning, followed by an exact replica of herself entering the apartment 20 minutes later using a key. Forensic experts scrutinized the footage for signs of manipulation or tampering, but found none. The individual mimicking Rebecca moved with precision, dressed identically, even carrying her distinctive leather bag. Yet, according to timestamps from her workplace security system, Rebecca had already swiped into her office building across town. "We are facing a doppelganger scenario," Detective Shaw informed her superior. "Someone who has meticulously studied Miss Thorne and can imitate her uncannily." The investigation escalated. Fingerprints in the apartment matched only Rebecca's, no foreign DNA detected. Neighbors saw nothing amiss, just Rebecca's usual comings and goings. Mrs. Keller, a neighbor, recalled greeting Rebecca upon her return one evening, but received no response, an unusual occurrence she noted but didn't find alarming. Rebecca began documenting the disturbances in a journal. Minor changes in her home escalated. Food vanished from her refrigerator, her computer displayed searches she hadn't initiated, and unsettlingly she discovered selfies on her phone resembling her but taken without her knowledge. In some images her expression appeared subtly off, the smile too wide, the eyes too intense. "I feel like I'm losing my mind," she confided to Detective Shaw during their third meeting, "or someone is deliberately trying to drive me to that point." The breakthrough emerged when investigators discerned a pattern in the security footage. The doppelganger only entered when Rebecca left for specific appointments, therapies, yoga classes, Sunday morning grocery runs, pre-planned activities with predictable durations. "Someone intimately knows your routine," Shaw explained. "This isn't random, it's targeted surveillance and infiltration." A forensic psychologist theorized they were dealing with a fixation case, a person fixated on assuming Rebecca's identity, possibly aiming to replace her entirely. Such instances were rare but documented in psychological studies. Typically, the perpetrator experienced a psychological breakdown, fixating on a victim symbolizing something they desired: stability, beauty, success, normalcy. The inquiry narrowed when Rebecca mentioned a former colleague, Lily Winters, dismissed due to escalating erratic behavior. Lily had closely worked with Rebecca, often remarking on their similarities. Post-dismissal, she sent Rebecca unsettling emails, one stating, "We could be the same person. Sometimes I feel more like you than you do." Detective Shaw secured a warrant to search Lily's residence, unveiling a chilling revelation that transformed the case from unsettling to horrifying. One room in Lily's abode had been transformed into a shrine-like replica of Rebecca's bedroom. The walls plastered with hundreds of snapshots of Rebecca engaged in various activities, unaware of being photographed. A closet housed replicas of Rebecca's attire, with makeup matching her preferred brands adorning a vanity, alongside meticulous notes on her behaviors, speech patterns, and daily routines. Most incriminating were the practice videos Lily had recorded herself mimicking Rebecca's walk, gestures, and expressions. The progression was evident, from awkward attempts to near-identical replication of the real Rebecca. "She aimed to become me," whispered Rebecca upon viewing the evidence. "She wasn't just imitating me, she was erasing me." Technicians discovered advanced tools for key duplication and electronic access card cloning in Lily's possession. She had devised an intricate system to track Rebecca's movements, including a calendar predicting her schedule in detail. What confounded investigators was Lily's end goal. Journals found in her home contained rambling entries shifting between first and third person, at times referring to Rebecca as me and her in the same passage. The final entry sent shivers down their spines. "Soon, only one of us will remain. The stronger one will prevail." Upon authorities moving to apprehend Lily, she had vanished. Signs of a hurried departure were evident in her apartment drawers left open, some technology missing. A nationwide alert was issued. Rebecca was relocated to a secure location under continuous surveillance while authorities monitored all locations associated with her past life for 3 weeks. Lily never surfaced. The case took a chilling turn when a security guard at Rebecca's former workplace reported an anomaly. Despite being on leave, Rebecca was spotted entering the building. Surveillance footage confirmed it an individual identical to Rebecca accessed the premises using a valid ID, proceeded to her former desk, and spent 40 minutes rifling through files before exiting. Meanwhile, the real Rebecca remained in protective custody at a guarded safe house. Truth became apparent. Lily hadn't fled but initiated her plan. She had assumed Rebecca's identity, slipping into her life while the authentic Rebecca remained concealed. The case remains unsolved. Lily Winters remains at large, and Rebecca Thorne forged a new identity in an undisclosed location. Detective Shaw keeps a photograph on her desk, two strikingly similar women, one Rebecca Thorne, the other Lily Winters. She often scrutinizes their features, seeking the disparities that set them apart. The most chilling aspect Shaw imparts to new recruits is not someone resembling or sounding like you. It's the desire to become you so intensely that they erase themselves in the process. Our identity isn't just what we present, it's what we safeguard fervently. And sometimes its value becomes apparent only when someone endeavors to steal it. Story 12. The apartment had sat empty for countless months before new tenants finally settled in. Their expectations were modest, perhaps a layer of dust, some abandoned furniture to deal with. Yet there was one door that stubbornly resisted all attempts to open it, a closet locked from within. When the landlord intervened and forced it ajar, the tenants braced themselves for the sight of old coats or discarded items. What they discovered, however, sent chills down their spines. The walls bore deep, jagged scratches, etched into the wood with a frantic urgency. And nestled in the corner, an ancient flip phone, its battery long drained save for one unread message glowing on the screen. Detective Morgan Shaw, seasoned by countless harrowing investigations, felt a peculiar unease wash over her as she surveyed the scene. It wasn't the absence of blood or overt violence that unsettled her, but rather the implication behind those desperate scratch marks, a tale of confinement and struggle. "We need forensics here immediately," she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, who was diligently documenting the eerie markings, "and fetch me the records of the previous tenants." The message on the phone was hauntingly simple. "I know what you did." The landlord, a perpetually anxious man with clammy hands, stammered about the former tenant, a young woman who had vanished without a trace, leaving rent unpaid. "Quiet type, kept to herself. Left about 6 months back," he muttered, his gaze skirting the closet as if afraid to meet its silent accusation. Forensic analysis uncovered a mosaic of blood samples interwoven within the scratch marks on the walls. Most matched a singular individual, presumably the missing tenant, Emma Caldwell, aged 28, reported as absent from her job when she ceased appearing. Yet 2 other DNA profiles surfaced. One remained a mystery in the databases, while the other belonged to a man supposedly deceased for 2 years. "This defies all reason," Shaw murmured, scrutinizing the perplexing findings on the forensic report. Derek Mercer, a convicted assailant whose demise had been verified through dental records, now appeared freshly inculpated in the closet's macabre narrative. Emma's living quarters painted a poignant picture of an abruptly halted existence. Unopened mail, a neglected coffee mug in the sink, a meticulously made bed. Her phone logs unveiled a pattern, regular calls with her sister, abruptly ceasing one day, interjected by a flurry of unidentified calls prior to her disappearance. The sister mentioned a mysterious boyfriend, Officer Reed relayed. No name given, just described as intense and private. Surveillance footage from a nearby store captured Emma's return to her building one fateful evening, trailed shortly after by a man in a baseball cap, meticulously evading the camera's lenses. The pivotal breakthrough materialized when partial fingerprints matching Derek Mercer were unearthed on the closet's interior doorknob. He staged his own demise, Shaw deduced. The question remains why and what binds him to Emma. The enigmatic DNA sample guided them to another missing person case, the disappearance of Lynette Porter 3 years prior. Though her trails had gone cold, witnesses recalled a woman matching her description frequenting Emma's abode. Shaw pieced together the puzzle while scrutinizing traffic camera footage. A vehicle registered to Derek Mercer's mother was repeatedly spotted near Emma's dwelling, with the driver's stature and build aligning with Derek's profile. The ensuing investigation led them to a secluded estate owned by the Mercer family, where behind formidable basement doors, Lynette Porter was discovered gaunt and emaciated, ensnared in conditions echoing Emma's harrowing ordeal. "He forced me to witness," Lynette murmured, her gaze vacant, claimed I needed to comprehend the fate of those defying him. The mounting evidence painted a grim portrait, Mercer's fixation on domination, photographs of women resembling Emma and Lynette, and most damningly, video footage of Mercer shoving Emma into the suffocating confines of the closet. "She thought she could expose me," his voice echoed in the recordings. "Reveal our secrets to the world. No one divulges my truths." The manhunt for Derek Mercer spanned jurisdictions, his elusive figure haunting law enforcement's pursuit. As experts combed through his psyche, a chilling profile emerged. Mercer didn't merely seek to end lives, but to orchestrate suffering, to relish the dwindling hope within confinements. Upon his apprehension at a bus terminal, Mercer clutched a fabricated identity and passage to a coastal destination. Nestled in his backpack duct tape, a hunting knife, and a newspaper clipping chronicling Emma's absence. During interrogation, Mercer exuded an eerie composure. "She dispatched that message herself," he declared of the phone. "She craved discovery, but she forfeited her right to salvation." The subsequent trial unveiled the elaborate charade Mercer had crafted to feign his own demise, leveraging dental records of a vagrant resembling him. For years, he had eluded scrutiny, preying on women echoing his inaugural victim. Emma's remains were never unearthed. Forensic insights hinted that she had likely succumbed within the closet, etching futile pleas upon unyielding walls. Her final message, a silent accusation preserved on a dormant phone, an indictment against her malevolent captor. The jury's verdict arrived swiftly after 4 hours of contemplation, guilty on all charges. As the judge pronounced a life sentence bereft of reprieve, Mercer's visage contorted into a faint smile, as if aligned with a cryptic rationale known solely to him. At the sentencing, Lynette Porter addressed the courtroom. "He ensnared us in confined spaces, for that's where his psyche dwells, entombed in shadows. While he languishes behind bars, I shall bask in the sunlight." The case reshaped the department's protocols for missing persons inquiries, honing in on relational dynamics and property scrutinies. Detective Shaw preserved the closet door from Emma's residence, mounting it in her office, a somber emblem that the most harrowing crime scenes don't always bear the stains of blood, but the echoes of a soul fighting for survival. Story 13. She entered through the front door, a flurry of dust dancing in the stagnant air. The abandoned house stood frozen in time, its peeling walls and shrouded furniture telling tales of neglect. Every step she took felt like a loop, a recurring journey that always led her back to the parlor. The doors, no matter which one she chose, all guided her to the same room. The only way out seemed to be the way she had come, but when she turned, the front door had vanished into thin air. The discovery of Morgan Pierce's body altered the house's identity from a mere curiosity to a grim crime scene. Detective Sarah Lind observed as forensic experts moved silently through the shadowed rooms, their presence ghostly in the dim light. The house had garnered a reputation among the locals, the place where compasses spun aimlessly, where whispers of unseen watchers lingered. Now, beneath its eerie facade, darker secrets lay hidden, waiting to be unveiled. The initial examination suggests she's been deceased for around 3 days, the medical examiner murmured, his voice barely audible in the solemn atmosphere. The cause of death appears to be asphyxiation. Morgan had been discovered seated in an antique chair in the parlor, her posture serene, hands folded with grace in her lap. There were no signs of a struggle, no marks of resistance. The tranquility of the scene unsettled even the most seasoned investigators. "Who found the body?" Lind inquired, her gaze fixed on her notes. "A real estate agent showing the property to potential buyers," her partner replied. "They stumbled upon her sitting there, mistaking her for a trespasser until they drew closer." The house had remained unoccupied since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, nearly 5 years prior. Legal disputes had left the property abandoned and forgotten, except by those seeking thrills or mischief. Morgan Pierce, a 26-year-old graduate student delving into architectural anomalies for her thesis, had been drawn to the enigmatic Victorian. Her friends described her as meticulous, driven, and captivated by spaces that defied conventional norms. Her roommate reported her missing 2 days ago, Lind remarked. Morgan had mentioned visiting the house where people get lost for her research. Investigations unveiled Morgan's frequent visits to the house in the weeks leading to her demise. Her journal entries chronicled peculiar acoustic phenomena, unexpected pockets of cold air, and doors that seemed to shift with each opening. In her final notes, she spoke of bringing specialized equipment to document what she termed spatial inconsistencies, yet this equipment remained elusive. During the autopsy, in unusual detail emerged traces of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, derived from a plant used in shamanic rituals. The substance had the potential to induce disorientation and vivid hallucinations, though not in amounts fatal. She wasn't one to dabble in recreational substances, her boyfriend asserted during questioning. Morgan was meticulous in her research. She wouldn't jeopardize her perceptions willingly. Digital investigations unearthed remnants of deleted messages on Morgan's phone, exchanges with an individual sharing her fascination with the house, someone claiming to hold its secrets. The tone of their conversations evolved, growing intimate and enigmatic. "The house retains its memories," one message hinted. "It yearns for someone to understand." The trail led detectives to Adam Reeves, an architectural historian who had engaged in correspondence with Morgan. His expertise in rare spatial phenomena had captivated her, and their professional ties had transcended into a more personal bond. Reeves, when questioned, appeared genuinely distraught by Morgan's passing. "The house has a reputation," he confessed. "The original architect wove optical illusions and false perspectives into its design. It was meant to bewilder and confuse. Morgan believed there was a deeper layer to it, something surpassing mere tricks of construction." However, Reeves had a solid alibi for the presumed time of Morgan's demise. Footage placed him delivering a lecture at a university symposium hours away. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source, the grandson of Eleanor Blackwood, now residing overseas. When approached by the investigators, he disclosed a family secret buried for generations. "My grandmother wasn't the sole Blackwood to meet their end in that house," he disclosed. "There were others, always discovered in the parlor, always appearing serene. The family referred to it as the claiming." He handed over journals spanning decades, detailing deaths initially attributed to natural causes. A pattern emerged. Individuals spending time within the house eventually succumbed to what the family cryptically termed the influence. A secondary search of the premises unveiled a concealed compartment behind the parlor fireplace. Within lay Morgan's missing equipment, alongside a curious discovery. A small chamber housed artifacts from diverse indigenous cultures, meticulously arranged in a geometric pattern. At the center rested a weathered figurine, its features smoothed by time and touch. Analysis identified the carving as a representation of a deity linked to liminal spaces, transitional thresholds between worlds. Traces of the alkaloid matching Morgan's toxicology were found on the artifacts. The case took a turn with forensic analysis indicating the presence of another individual at the time of Morgan's passing. Partial fingerprints, unrelated to Morgan or any known visitors, were retrieved from doorknobs throughout the house. 3 weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was found deceased in his residence. Like Morgan, he was seated facing the entrance, a tranquil expression adorning his features, the same alkaloid in his system. Clutched in his hand was a key, unmatching any lock within his apartment, but fitting snugly into the concealed compartment in the Victorian. In his final email, preserved as a testament to his findings, Reeves penned, "The house doesn't ensnare you physically, it ensnares your perception." Morgan was correct. The doors lead to their familiar destinations, yet something convinces you of a circular path. Once the truth dawns on you, you can depart at will, but by then the desire to leave has waned. The case lingers open, designated as suspicious deaths under scrutiny. The Victorian stands condemned, its access restricted by the authorities. Nonetheless, rumors persist of flickering lights within on certain nights, and of visitors who vanish within its walls. Some locals speculate that the house claims those who unearth its secrets too deeply. Others believe Morgan and Reeves unearthed something ancient and potent, existing within the interstices of conventional reality. The truth remains as elusive as an exit in a house where all doors converge upon the beginning. Story 14, The Enigmatic House at the Edge of the Woods. In the quiet town, nestled amidst the whispering trees, there lay a house that time seemed to have forgotten. It stood solitary, a silent sentinel with windows like shadowed eyes and a porch that sagged wearily, burdened by the weight of forgotten years. The townspeople never spoke of it, as if by ignoring its existence they could keep its secrets locked away in the depths of the forest. No one could claim ownership of the house, and its origins were lost in the mists of memory. But one fateful day, a group of hikers strayed too close to its weathered walls and discovered a chilling mystery etched into the ancient wood, a list of names, carved with a precision that hinted at a purpose beyond mere vandalism. And at the very bottom, freshly engraved, was a name that sent shivers down their spines, a name unfamiliar to them all, until one of them whispered, his voice trembling, "That's mine." Under the cloak of night, a call came into the dispatch, a mere trespassing report on the surface. The caller identified himself as Mason Wright, the hiker who had stumbled upon his own name etched into the enigmatic house. What began as a routine investigation into possible mischief soon spiraled into a realm of inexplicable dread. Detective Sarah Keller arrived at the scene as darkness draped the forest in its velvety embrace. Her flashlight pierced the shadows, revealing the facade of the house adorned with a chilling tally of 27 names, some faded with time, others sharp as if freshly carved. And there, at the end of the haunting list, gleamed the name of Mason Wright, the raw edges of the carving still whispering of recent intrusion. "I've never set foot in this place before," Mason declared, his breath mingling with the icy air. "How could anyone know my name here?" The investigation unfurled like a sinister tapestry, each thread weaving a tale of inexplicable horror. Background checks on the names led to a bone-chilling revelation. All the listed individuals had vanished without a trace while hiking alone in the woods over the past 40 years. Some cases had grown cold, while others remained open wounds in the hearts of those left behind. Forensic experts meticulously documented the carvings, each stroke telling a story of fear and disappearance. The oldest name, that of Rebecca Hansen, harkened back to a time when she had ventured into the woods and never returned, leaving behind only a solitary boot by a murmuring stream. As Detective Keller delved deeper, Mason's innocence seemed unwavering. His companions underwent scrutiny, leading to a chilling discovery in the photographs: a spectral figure, blurred yet unmistakable, haunting the edges of their memories. The house, seemingly abandoned, held a macabre secret in its basement, a shrine of lost belongings meticulously arranged, each item bearing a name from the wall outside. Bloodstains, old yet stubborn, whispered of forgotten horrors that the walls had witnessed. As the tendrils of the investigation tightened, Mason's sanity began to fray, haunted by unseen whispers and phantom footprints that led to his door but never away. The shadow of Victor Blackwood, the elusive hunter who had called this house his own, loomed larger with each passing day. The revelation of Blackwood's sinister journal, detailing his predatory pursuits, cast a pall over the forest that echoed with the screams of the lost. The manhunt that ensued was a symphony of fear and desperation, culminating in a chilling realization: sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted. Mason's disappearance left a void in the hearts of those who sought answers, while the discovery of a freshly carved name in the hidden workshop spoke of a malevolent force that refused to be contained. The house, now a sentinel of dread, stands vigil over the forest, its secrets buried deep within its walls. The names on its facade have become a whispered legend, a cautionary tale that echoes through the trees, warning all who dare to venture near the house at the edge of the woods holds horrors best left undisturbed. Story 15, the apartment exuded an aura of age, its time-worn features telling stories of bygone days. The heating system emitted low, almost mournful groans while the pipes rattled, creating a symphony of old house sounds that echoed through its halls. It was all part of the charm, or so they said, but she knew better. One night, as she lay in bed, a hushed voice, barely audible yet unmistakably present, drifted through the vents like a ghostly whisper. It wasn't the usual distant murmurs of a neighbor's conversation. This voice was different, calling out to her in a way that sent shivers down her spine. Curiosity mingled with fear. She approached the vent, heart hammering in her chest. A sudden rush of icy air brushed against her cheek, followed by a soft, almost playful declaration: "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw found herself in the heart of the empty apartment, a silence heavy with unanswered questions enveloping her. Her gaze fixated on the rusted vent cover, forcibly removed from its place on the wall. Around her, the forensics team moved with precision, capturing every detail with their cameras, freezing the scene in time. Alina Reeves, the missing woman whose fate had led them here, had been absent for 7 long days, her absence unnoticed until the building's stale air betrayed her presence. The discovery inside the ventilation system left even seasoned investigators at a loss for explanations. Officer Patel, his voice measured, recounted the details. Alina had reported hearing voices, a fact dismissed by the building management as mere quirks of an aging structure. Shaw knelt by the vent, tracing the deep scratch marks that marred its edges. These marks, she noted in a hushed tone, were not the result of tools but of sheer desperation. of fingernails clawing frantically from within. Alina was a beloved figure, a kindergarten teacher whose warmth had touched many. Her disappearance had left a void, her classroom filled with unopened cards from worried students. Her sister, during an emotional interview, revealed Alina's growing paranoia in the days leading up to her vanishing act. The belief that unseen eyes watched her, that whispered words reached her through the very walls of her home. A chilling realization settled over Shaw as she scanned the apartment, piecing together the fragments of Alina's final days. The forensic report unearthed unsettling clues. Fibers trapped in the vent grill matched those from Alina's favorite cardigan. A foreign fingerprint not belonging to Alina lingered on the inside of the vent cover. Yet the most haunting discoveries came from the audio recordings retrieved from Alina's phone. Alone in her car, rain pattering a somber melody on the roof, Shaw listened as Alina's voice, tinged with fear, beckoned the unseen presence. "If you're real, say something." The response, a whisper barely audible, sent a chill down Shaw's spine. "Alina, sweet Alina, let me in." A history of tenants vacating the apartment prematurely, of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena, cast a shadow over the building. Harold Weber, the superintendent with a seemingly unremarkable record, carried with him a hidden past that only surfaced under Shaw's scrutiny. His demeanor shifted imperceptibly at the mention of apartment 4B's previous occupants, a hint of unease creeping into his composure. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, painting a picture of a sinister presence lurking within the building's walls. The investigation took an unexpected turn as a concealed access panel was uncovered in Alina's bathroom, leading to a hidden maintenance passage that wound its way through the building's structure. Within this clandestine network, remnants of a clandestine life emerged. A flashlight, discarded wrappers, a water bottle, a trail left behind by a voyeuristic intruder. Shaw's instincts led her to Weber's meticulously ordered apartment, a facade of normalcy that crumbled under the weight of incriminating evidence stored on his computer. Audio recordings, photographs, a digital diary chronicling his obsession with Alina, all laid bare in chilling detail. A storage unit registered under Weber's name unveiled a macabre collection of mementos from past tenants, preserved like macabre trophies of a twisted connection. His arrest, his serene compliance in the face of justice, only added to his enigma. "They all hear me eventually," he intoned during interrogation, a calm certainty in his voice that sent shivers down Shaw's spine. The truth behind Alina's fate slowly came to light, painting a harrowing picture of a life cut short by unseen hands, guided by whispered promises of sanctuary within the building's very structure. As the trial unfolded, Weber's facade of normalcy crumbled, revealing a mind consumed by delusions of symbiosis with the building itself. The jury's swift verdict echoed the finality of justice served, condemning Weber for his heinous crimes. Yet as he was escorted from the courtroom, his parting words lingered in Shaw's mind, a chilling reminder of the horrors that had unfolded within those walls. The apartment building, now a hollow shell of its former self, stood as a testament to the darkness that lurked within its confines. Despite attempts at renovation, whispers still danced through the vents, cold drafts carrying unseen voices that lingered in the air. The old heating system groaned its mournful tune, the pipes rattling in a ghostly echo of the past. To those who dared to listen, the building's secrets whispered of a presence that refused to be silenced, a reminder that some echoes linger long after the truth has been unveiled. Story 16, the tale that unfolded within the walls of the Victorian-era home, was not one of peeling wallpaper, but of a haunting mystery waiting to be unraveled. Michael and Sarah Klein, enamored by the charm of the old house with its ornate woodwork and high ceilings, stumbled upon a secret hidden beneath the layers of time. It all began with a simple water stain in the master bedroom, a yellowish blemish on the floral wallpaper that led them to discover a name Alina Winters etched repeatedly in ink, each stroke more frantic than the last. Who was Alina Winters, and why was her name a haunting echo in the walls of their new abode? Their quest for answers unearthed a missing persons case from decades past, a young woman with dark hair and piercing eyes, strikingly similar to the previous owner, Margaret Cavendish. The resemblance was uncanny, a thread connecting the present to a shadowy past. As they delved deeper into the enigma, their cozy home transformed into a nexus of secrets and whispers. The discovery of hidden compartments and forgotten identities painted a picture of deception and fractured realities. Alina Winters and Margaret Cavendish blurred into one, their fates intertwined in a tragic dance of obsession and betrayal. The walls themselves became a canvas of confession and sorrow, bearing witness to a twisted tale of lost innocence and shattered minds. Rebecca Eldridge, a troubled soul consumed by dissociative identity disorder, had woven a tapestry of lies and illusions, each thread leading back to the fateful disappearance of Alina Winters. Forensic teams descended upon the property, unearthing long-buried truths and laying bare the bones of the past. Alina's remains, hidden beneath the serene facade of the backyard, whispered of a life cut short by jealousy and madness. And in a final revelation, the facade of Margaret Cavendish crumbled to reveal the fragmented psyche of Rebecca Eldridge, a soul torn asunder by the weight of her own deceptions. The names on the wall, a mosaic of guilt and longing, spoke volumes of a mind teetering on the edge of sanity. As the sun set on the once charming Victorian home, it stood as a silent witness to the darkness that lurked within its walls. The legacy of Alina Winters was finally laid to rest, her story etched in the annals of true crime, a cautionary tale of how even the most idyllic facade can hide a labyrinth of secrets waiting to be uncovered. And as Michael and Sarah gazed upon their now infamous abode, they knew that some mysteries were best left undisturbed, lest the shadows of the past come creeping back to haunt the present. Story 17, the tale unfolds in the fading light of a closing costume shop, its shelves barren as old inventory found new homes. Amidst the remnants of forgotten disguises, a woman's hand reached for a mask, its delicate features both captivating and eerily lifelike. As she placed it on the counter, the cashier hesitated, murmuring, "That's not ours." Perplexed, she searched for a tag but found none. With a nonchalant shrug, she carried it away to her dwelling. That night, a soft sound stirred her from slumber, a mere whisper of fabric shifting. Her eyes fluttered open to find the mask perched on her nightstand, its gaze fixed upon her. The woman, known as Catherine Reed, was later discovered by her neighbor, the front door ajar, allowing the morning light to spill into the darkened abode. What awaited inside was a scene that would linger in the minds of investigators for years to come. Catherine lay motionless on her bedroom floor, the mask vanished without a trace. Detective Morgan arrived at the scene, the clicking shutters providing a haunting rhythm to the hushed voices that surrounded the solemn space. "No signs of forced entry," noted an officer, pen scratching against paper. The detective's keen gaze swept the room, noting subtle details that hinted at a hidden truth. An open drawer, a lipstick-stained water glass, mundane yet ominous in the context of the tragedy that had unfolded. The medical examiner, with a solemn expression, declared the cause of death unclear upon initial examination. No wounds, no signs of struggle, only a frozen mask of terror etched upon Catherine's features. Bending closer, the detective whispered, something frightened her to the core. Catherine, an art appraiser known for her meticulous eye, had lived a quiet existence, unraveled by a mysterious mask. Colleagues spoke of her expertise in spotting forgeries, her ability to discern authenticity from deception. Could this very talent have led to her untimely demise? Footage from the costume shop revealed a puzzling interaction, a mask unrecognized, a tale untold. The cashier's confusion, the owner's denial, all adding to the enigma that shrouded the mask's origins. The detective's visit to the now empty shop unearthed a dark history, whispered tales of masks tied to inexplicable deaths. Forensic analysis uncovered microscopic fibers on Catherine's fingertips, hinting at a desperate grasp in her final moments. These fibers, a blend of human hair and an unknown organic material, defied identification, linking her fate to a long line of unsolved tragedies. In a clandestine meeting, a retired detective shared a chilling discovery, a journal hidden within Catherine's abode, detailing her descent into paranoia and dread. The masks moved, watched, and claimed lives before moving on, a cycle of terror spanning centuries. As the investigation unfolded, a sinister truth emerged. The masks were vessels of malevolence, seeking new hosts in a macabre dance of death. Catherine's demise was attributed to extreme fear, her heart ceasing under the weight of terror. Surveillance footage revealed a chilling sight, a figure, donned in a mask resembling Catherine's features, moving with an unnatural cadence. An alert was issued for the missing mask, but it remained elusive, reappearing months later in a distant vintage shop, its buyer vanishing into obscurity. The case remained unsolved, a haunting reminder of a truth too bizarre for official records. The detective, haunted by Catherine's journal, felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her in the stillness of night. She locked her doors, sealed her windows, dreading the day the mask would resurface, seeking a new victim in its unending quest for souls. The mask, a harbinger of doom, lurked in the shadows, waiting to ensnare another unsuspecting soul. And when it found its new host, the cycle of fear and death would begin anew, a malevolent force that transcended time itself. Story 18. In the quiet solitude of Sarah Winter's apartment, a sense of unease lingered like a whisper in the shadows. The Polaroid she held in her hands was a relic of the past, a snapshot of innocence tainted by a chilling presence. Decades old, the photo captured a forgotten birthday, with smiling faces and flickering candles painting a scene of joy. But as Sarah inherited a box of old memories from her mother's attic, a sense of foreboding crept in. Among the faded photographs chronicling family gatherings from her childhood, she discovered something unsettling. A shape, barely perceptible at first, lurking in the background of each photo. A man, half hidden in shadow, standing just beyond the glow of the candles. He was not one of them. No one remembered his presence, yet in every picture he drew closer. The journey into darkness began when Sarah stumbled upon the collection while cleaning out after her mother's funeral. A simple cardboard box labeled Memories held a treasure trove of happier moments, or so it seemed. But as she delved deeper, the past revealed a nightmare that refused to stay buried. In the first photo, he was a mere silhouette on the edge of the frame during her 7th birthday party. A dark figure, face obscured, watching from the shadows by the sliding glass door. In the following images, his presence grew more pronounced. Moving silently, he crept closer, unnoticed by those in the picture. Shaken to her core, Sarah reached out to her father. seeking answers to the haunting mystery that unfolded before her eyes. His initial disbelief turned to a chilling realization as he too saw the phantom figure haunting their cherished memories. Who was this man, and why was he intruding upon their past? Desperate for clarity, Sarah turned to Detective Marcus Reed, a weathered soul accustomed to unraveling mysteries that defied logic. As rain tapped against the windows of the precinct, Sarah laid out the damning evidence before him. The detective's steady hands traced the chilling progression of the figure through the photos, each frame revealing a sinister dance towards the unsuspecting children. The truth remained elusive, shrouded in shadows that refused to dissipate. No one recognized the mysterious man. No one could explain his presence in the captured moments of joy and celebration. The investigation took a dark turn as the figure's identity remained a haunting enigma. But as Sarah unearthed more photos from family albums, a breakthrough emerged. With the help of a skilled computer specialist, hidden details came to light. A scar, a ring, a glint of recognition in a window's reflection, all pointing to a man long vanished from memory. Dental records provided the final piece of the puzzle, a connection to Robert Keller, a maintenance worker with a dark past. His disappearance intertwined with unsolved child abductions, crimes that echoed across decades and regions. The sinister shadow in the photos was no longer a faceless specter, but a man with a chilling history. As authorities delved deeper, the grim truth unraveled. Keller's ties to the vacation property where Sarah's birthday had been held revealed a sinister pattern of disappearances. The buried secrets of his past came to light, buried beneath concrete foundations alongside the remnants of stolen childhoods. The revelation sent shivers down Sarah's spine as she sat surrounded by the damning evidence that had torn through the facade of innocence. The detective's call brought news of closure for grieving families, yet the price of truth was steep. Remains found near the vacation properties confirmed the fate of the missing children, their voices finally heard across the void of time. In the final birthday photo, the candles flickered, casting a warm glow on faces frozen in a moment of joy. But behind the innocence of youth, the figure lingered, a haunting presence finally unmasked. The shadow that had haunted their memories stepped into the light of justice, his legacy of darkness laid bare. As Sarah gathered the photos, each frame a testament to the unseen threats that lurk in the corners of our lives, she knew that some shadows never fade. They move through celebrations unseen, leaving behind a trail of hidden horrors captured in the stillness of time. And in that moment of reckoning, the dark figure in the family photos became a symbol of the enduring power of truth, no matter how deeply it is buried in the shadows of the past. Story 19. The aged apartment possessed its own peculiarities, pipes that moaned, floorboards that whispered secrets of the past. Yet the new tenant discerned that what she heard echoed beyond the realm of normal. The footsteps, methodical and unwavering, resonated from above, a slow dance across the ceiling. Strangely, she resided on the topmost floor. One fateful night, courage brewed within her, and she tapped the ceiling with a broomstick. The sound ceased abruptly. Silence enveloped the space, a pregnant pause before a solitary knock emerged from within the ceiling itself. Sarah Coleman, the new tenant, chose to keep the knocking incident shrouded in secrecy. She convinced herself it was the building's settling groans, or perhaps a small creature seeking refuge in the attic. Despite the nightly footfalls persisting, she adapted, masking them with amplified television volumes, donning headphones at bedtime, anything to muffle the rhythmic steps that traversed her ceiling in the cloak of darkness. Detective Morris's attention was piqued when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a concealed crawlspace during routine maintenance. The worker had unraveled a portion of drywall in the hallway adjacent to Sarah's unit to mend a leak. Beyond the barrier lay an unexpected passage, a clandestine living space, adorned with remnants of sustenance, a tattered blanket, and a weathered notebook. The superintendent swiftly alerted the authorities. Upon Detective Morris's arrival, accompanied by his partner, Detective Rivera, the maintenance worker trembled, his face drained of color. "Someone dwelled within the walls," he muttered incessantly. "Someone observed." Contained within the discovered notebook were intricate insights into Sarah Coleman's life, her routines, her guests, her culinary choices, her viewing preferences, her every move meticulously chronicled. The script, once orderly, spiraled into chaos towards the end, with enigmatic symbols adorning the margins. "The subject resists my attempts," the final entry lamented. "She defies me, none defy me." Forensic experts scoured the crawl space, unearthing fingerprints estranged from any database. They unveiled a labyrinth of passages woven into the building's walls and ceilings, some dating back decades. These conduits linked to 5 separate units, culminating in observation points concealed within one solitary apartment, Sarah Coleman's. Residents of the building were interrogated, but none reported aberrations beyond the customary sounds of communal living. However, former occupants painted a different narrative. 3 previous tenants of Sarah's abode recounted sensations of being watched or hearing inexplicable movements. 1 tenant vacated after a mere fortnight, yet the tales remained untold for fear of sounding delusional. The pivotal breakthrough emerged when forensics stumbled upon minuscule blood traces in one of the crawl spaces. DNA analysis connected the findings to Martin Weaver, a past resident who had vanished without a trace 4 years prior. Martin had occupied the unit directly beneath Sarah's. Detective Morris delved into Martin's disappearance anew. Locals recalled Martin's grievances regarding noises emanating from above his apartment. Confrontations with the silent recluse residing overhead, Edward, preceded Martin's mysterious disappearance. Edward absconded the ensuing month, leaving no forwarding details. A meticulous scrutiny of Edward's past unveiled a recurrent pattern. He gravitated towards top-floor accommodations, maintaining minimal social interactions before vanishing without a trace. A neighbor from his former residence labeled him as intense, recounting his incessant yearning for silence. Property records exposed Edward's acquisition of remote rural terrain. Upon investigation, a cabin materialized, adorned with photographs and notes a macabre shrine of former residents, including Sarah Coleman and Martin Weaver. Maps delineating ventilation systems and structural vulnerabilities adorned the walls, alongside journals cataloging specimen observations and habitat preservation. At the cabin's core stood a corkboard, embellished with missing persons reports of 6 individuals, all past residents of buildings where Edward had resided. Beneath the board, gouges marred the wooden floor, testament to some heavy object dragged repeatedly. Cadaver dogs led investigators to a freshly disturbed patch of earth behind the cabin, unearthing human remains, each grave a grim testament to Edward's malevolence. As forensic specialists endeavored to identify the victims, Detective Morris revisited Sarah's abode. The crawl spaces had been sealed, yet whispers of noises persisted. During the installation of new security measures, maintenance workers stumbled upon a hidden corner where the ceiling met the wall. A second notebook, contemporary to the first, lay nestled within. The initial page bore a cryptic message. "They discovered my former lair, yet my new sanctuary remains concealed." The final page depicted a crude sketch of Sarah's apartment layout, with a scarlet path delineating a new passage and a date for that very night. Officers hastened to evacuate Sarah, only to find her dwelling deserted. Her phone rested on the kitchen counter, the television murmuring softly. Steam veiled the bathroom mirror, revealing a chilling inscription etched by a phantom finger. "Look up." The ceiling panel above the shower had been pried open. The manhunt for Edward, now identified as Edward Mercer, a former construction specialist, persists. His expertise in structural dynamics facilitated the creation of hidden observation points and passageways. Thermal imaging scans unveiled no present habitation within the walls of Sarah's building. Sarah Coleman remains missing, her fate intertwined with similar disappearances across state borders. Authorities have issued alerts to apartment managers regarding unauthorized alterations and concealed spaces. Yet the specter haunting Detective Morris transcends the grisly graves, and journals it lingers in the sound of footsteps resonating above Sarah Coleman in an ostensibly uninhabited apartment. The footsteps that paused upon her invocation, then reciprocated. In the solitude of night, Detective Morris finds himself gazing upward at his ceiling, attuned to the whispers of the past, waiting, wondering who else may be listening in the shadows of the night. Story 20. The aged envelope lay in the detective's hand, its edges tinged yellow, yet the stamp was crisp as if just affixed days before. With caution, the detective unfolded it, revealing a lone sheet of paper donning a message typed hastily in an irregular font. "I am sorry for what I did." A peculiar dampness clung to the paper, carrying a faint scent of iron that lingered in the air. Only upon closer inspection did the detective notice a reddish smudge along the lower edge, distinct from any ink. Detective Sarah Morgan carefully placed the letter into an evidence bag, her gloved hands moving with practiced expertise. The forensic team had already confirmed her suspicions. The reddish stain was human blood, matching the DNA from an unsolved homicide case that had plagued the department for years. The victim, a young journalist named Rebecca Warren, was discovered in her apartment with multiple stab wounds, her laptop missing, notes strewn across the floor, hinting that the attack might have related to a story she was pursuing. Despite numerous interviews and exhaustive investigations, the case had grown cold until this mysterious letter arrived at the precinct, simply addressed to Homicide Division. Traces of fingerprints on the paper and envelope were scarce, only faint smudges suggesting the sender had worn gloves. The postmark, however, provided a vital light after months of stagnation. Morgan gathered her team in the dimly lit briefing room, the walls adorned with images of crime scenes, timelines, and profiles of suspects who had led them nowhere. Placing the image of the letter at the heart of the board, she announced, "This changes everything. Our perpetrator shows remorse." Detective James Chen, her longtime partner on the case, scrutinized the letter, countering, "Or perhaps they wish us to believe so. The blood could be a theatrical touch, a means of mockery." The forensic team traced the unique typewriter patterns to a model long out of production, a rare find but not unattainable. They embarked on a quest, reaching out to antique shops and collectors across the region. As the investigation gained traction, they delved deeper into Rebecca's life. Her editor described her as relentless, devoted to uncovering corruption. Her latest assignment involved delving into a wealthy family with ties to local politics. Following up on leads, the detectives revisited Rebecca's boyfriend, Michael Barnes. During their initial conversation months ago, he appeared distraught, providing a solid alibi. However, with the letter now in their possession, subtle shifts in his demeanor caught their attention, furtive glances, a tremor in his hands. Rebecca mentioned feeling followed, he confessed during the subsequent interview. I dismissed it as paranoia due to her investigation. I should have listened. While the detectives pursued this new lead, a second letter materialized, bearing the same typewritten message, stained with blood once more. This time the words extended. She uncovered too much about the family, about the inheritance, about what transpired with the patriarch. It was never my intention for things to escalate to that extent. The trail led the investigators to the mansion of the deceased patriarch, where they questioned the eldest son, Richard. Among his collection of antiques were several vintage typewriters. His responses seemed rehearsed, polished, raising suspicions. A breakthrough emerged when microscopic fibers on the envelopes matched custom stationery exclusive to the family's youngest daughter, Eleanor. Further probing unveiled that Richard had borrowed her stationery a month earlier. A search of Richard's residence unearthed a concealed chamber containing clippings about Rebecca, surveillance images, and a vintage typewriter identical to the one used for the letters. Analysis confirmed the blood belonged to Rebecca. Unexpectedly, a link between Richard and Michael surfaced through bank records, revealing substantial payments from Richard to Michael in the weeks leading to Rebecca's murder. Confronted, Michael crumbled, confessing. She had evidence that Richard poisoned his father to hasten his inheritance. I informed Richard of her discoveries, intending only to intimidate her into dropping the story. I never envisioned he would resort to murder. The final puzzle piece emerged when Eleanor disclosed a clandestine recording capturing Richard and Michael discussing how to handle Rebecca, with Richard's voice unmistakably stating, "She must be silenced permanently." Richard's attempt to flee culminated in his arrest. The prosecution built a compelling case around the letters, the typewriter, financial transactions, and Eleanor's recording. Michael struck a plea deal, offering his testimony. Throughout the trial, Richard maintained his innocence, blaming Michael for framing him. Yet the mounting evidence was undeniable. The jury swiftly rendered a guilty verdict after brief deliberation. As Richard was escorted away in restraints, Detective Morgan approached Rebecca's grieving parents in the courtroom. Though no words could mend their loss, the conviction provided a semblance of closure. The blood-stained letters remained secured in evidence, a poignant reminder that even meticulously planned crimes leave traces, and that remorse, be it authentic or strategic, can lead to the downfall of those who believe they have executed the perfect crime. The case of Rebecca Warren emerged as a pivotal lesson in detective training, illustrating that breakthroughs sometimes stem not from advanced forensics, but from the simplicity of an antiquated typewriter and the burden of guilt weighing on a killer's conscience. Story 21. In the heart of the night, within a dimly lit hallway of an aging, forgotten motel, a woman found herself drawn to a door marked by an eerie chill and an unsettling presence that lingered beyond its wooden frame. The hotel itself exuded a sense of transience, a place where people passed through fleetingly, their stories left untold. Detective Morgan Reed, a seeker of truth in shadows, entered a crime scene shrouded in the scent of blood, a metallic tang that whispered of violence. A young woman, her life extinguished, lay motionless on the floor, a silent witness to a horror that defied explanation. Reed knelt beside the victim, her gaze tracing the lines of tragedy etched upon the still form. As the investigation unfolded, layers of darkness peeled back to reveal a chilling pattern. 3 women, their lives snuffed out in the quiet anonymity of cheap motels, their deaths linked by a thread of twisted desire. The killer's signature, a macabre calling card that taunted justice with its enigma. Through the haze of clues and half-truths, Reed navigated a maze of deceit and hidden motives. The hunt led her to a man of shadows, a figure cloaked in the guise of respectability. Charles Emerson, a man of influence and secrets, stood at the center of a web of lies woven with meticulous care. In the cold light of interrogation, Emerson's facade crumbled, revealing the darkness that lurked beneath. A calculated predator, he preyed upon women who mirrored a past long buried, their innocence a facade for his depravity. The motel room, a stage for his twisted games, bore witness to the horrors he enacted in the name of self-preservation. The trial laid bare the depths of Emerson's cruelty, his hollow gaze meeting the accusing eyes of those he had wronged. Justice, a fragile balance in the face of such malevolence, rendered its verdict with solemn finality. Emerson, stripped of his illusions, faced a lifetime of solitude within the confines of his own making. Yet for Detective Reed, the echoes of the door on the left case lingered like shadows cast by unseen hands. In the quiet moments between cases, she found herself haunted by the specter of locked doors and unanswered questions. The keys, silent witnesses to unspeakable truths, remained as relics of a darkness that defied closure. As the world moved on, Reed carried with her the weight of untold stories, the whispers of the forgotten echoing in the halls of her mind. In the stillness of night, she traced the contours of a mystery that refused to be silenced, a reminder that some doors, once opened, could never be shut again. Story 22. The worn wooden plank shifted beneath her weight, a subtle movement that caught her attention. Curiosity piqued. She knelt down, tracing her fingertips along the edges, sensing the hidden secret below. The floor whispered of mysteries veiled beneath its surface. With gentle precision, she pried up the boards, unveiling a shadowy, narrow cavity lurking beneath the foundation of her new abode. Initially shrouded in dust and cobwebs, the space slowly revealed its secrets to her keen eyes. A mattress, a chair. And nestled in the corner, a weathered notebook, its pages adorned with a familiar name, her own name scrawled repetitively in a haunting mantra. Detective Morgan Reed loomed silently behind Sarah Coleman, observing as she peered into the abyss beneath her recently acquired dwelling. The fear etched in Sarah's gaze hinted at a deeper disturbance beyond the mere discovery of a hidden chamber. It was a violation of sanctuary, a malevolent intrusion into what should have been a fresh genesis for her. Refrain from further exploration, Detective Reed cautioned, her voice a tranquil yet resolute command. Clicking on her flashlight, she cast a beam of light into the concealed recesses, exposing walls adorned with surveillance photographs, snapshots of Sarah navigating her daily routines, captured in a chilling display of obsession that had lurked right beneath her unsuspecting feet. Sarah had purchased the quaint cottage from the estate of an elderly recluse named Walter Green, a man who had departed this world without leaving behind any known kin. The property had sat vacant for months before finding its way onto the market, its allure painted as charming and in need of minor refurbishments. No mention of the hidden chamber had surfaced during inspections or negotiations. I never crossed paths with him, the former owner, Sarah murmured. The neighbors mentioned he kept to himself. I was under the impression that basement access had been sealed shut decades ago. That's what the inspection report indicated. As crime scene investigators descended upon the scene, their equipment reverberating against the time-worn floorboards, they meticulously documented every detail, extracting the mattress, chair, and notebook from the clandestine enclave. Forensic scrutiny revealed an abundance of Walter Green's fingerprints scattered throughout the hidden lair, a disconcerting testament to his clandestine vigilance. What unsettled the investigators most was the timeline. They meticulously reconstructed a timeline that unveiled Walter's meticulous surveillance of Sarah, spanning at least 3 years prior to his demise. He had shadowed her steps, shared her public spaces, and yet Sarah remained oblivious to his presence. The intensity of his fixation often escalates, elucidated the department's psychologist during a debriefing. The subject transitions from fantasy to premeditation. The concealed chamber suggests he was priming for a more direct engagement. Detective Reed's inquiry took an unforeseen twist when she delved into Walter's past, unearthing a former colleague from his days in the maintenance department at the local shopping center. Nervously, the man divulged fidgeting with his wedding band. Walter mentioned her at times, said she reminded him of someone. I assumed it was merely an infatuation of an elderly man. I never fathomed. His voice trailed off, his gaze fixed on his trembling hands. Did he ever hint at any schemes involving her? Reed probed further. Not explicitly schemes, but he had this phrase he'd repeat about how she belonged with him. I dismissed it as mere chatter. Securing a warrant to explore Walter's workplace locker, left untouched since his passing, yielded a key that defied fitting any of his home's locks. Tracing the serial number led them to a storage unit registered under his name. With a metallic screech, the door of the unit rolled open, unveiling a meticulously arranged replica of Sarah's former apartment, her bed, her desk, even her cherished living room ensemble. Walter had painstakingly recreated her living space down to the minutest details, with a mannequin adorned in a wig mirroring Sarah's hairstyle seated at the replica desk. Yet the most disconcerting sight was a calendar, marked with a date just 1 week after Walter's sudden demise from a heart attack. The circled date bore a stark inscription in crimson ink, "Together." Further investigation unveiled Walter's institutionalization during his youth due to an infatuation with a female educator, receiving treatment for erotomania, a delusion where the subject believes in a reciprocated love that exists only in their mind. Released into society, Walter had lived a reclusive existence devoid of incident until Sarah inadvertently triggered his dormant fixation. At the precinct, Reed laid out crime scene photographs across the conference table. His demise was colored by a delusion of a profound connection. In his distorted reality, they were destined for union. Could she have unknowingly crossed paths with him somewhere, something that ignited this fixation? Queried another detective. Reed shook her head. No tangible evidence. At times, these obsessions demand only a fleeting gesture, a smile exchanged with a stranger, eye contact lingering a fraction too long. For an individual with his history, that could be ample fuel. Opting to sell the property, Sarah found solace in distancing herself from the haunting memories that lingered within its walls. During the final walkthrough with her real estate agent, she stood in the living room, encircling herself with her arms. I can't help but ponder what might have unfolded had he not met his end when he did, she murmured softly. How long would I have dwelled here, unaware of his watchful eyes, unaware of the secrets concealed beneath my very floorboards? With Walter's demise, the case was officially closed, classified as stalking with intent, although the intended abduction never transpired. The psychological evaluation of the evidence suggested Walter had harbored plans to confine Sarah within either the hidden chamber or the storage unit. Sarah embarked on a fresh chapter, relocating far from the shadows of the past, altering her routines and guarding her privacy with heightened vigilance. Reed sporadically checked in on her, a silent acknowledgement of how precariously close Sarah had skirted the brink of becoming a mere statistic, another casualty. The cottage found new owners, a young couple oblivious to its dark history. The concealed room was sealed off, its secrets entombed beneath fresh floorboards. Life persisted, yet for those privy to the truth, the tale of the hidden chamber beneath the floor remained a shuddering parable of unseen perils, of monsters who slipped through the grasp of justice, and of victims who narrowly evaded their fates. Story 23, The Whispering Call. It began with a pocket dial, a mere echo of static and muffled sounds that almost went unnoticed by the operator, until a voice broke through the haze. A woman's voice, urgent and trembling, whispered, "He's here." And then silence descended like a heavy curtain. The mysterious call led the authorities to an old, abandoned house that had stood empty for years. No signs of forced entry, no disturbances in the dust. Yet there on the kitchen counter, amidst the layers of neglect, sat a phone, its screen softly glowing. The call had been made mere minutes ago. Detective Morgan Reed found herself drawn back to the playback button, her finger hovering over it for the 5th time. The whisper lingered in her mind, haunting, desperate, and filled with an impossible terror. The abandoned property once belonged to the Sullivan family, who had left after a devastating house fire that ravaged the West Wing. Since then, it had remained untouched, except for the monthly visits of the caretaker, who swore that no one had trespassed. "Background check on the number," Morgan inquired of her partner, Detective Walsh. The answer came swiftly. The number belonged to Catherine Sullivan, the daughter who had tragically perished in a car accident 3 years prior. As Morgan gazed at the phone nestled in the evidence bag, the case unraveled before her. A deceased woman's phone making calls from a deserted residence, a puzzle with no logical solution. The dust around the phone seemed disturbed only where it sat, as if it had appeared out of thin air. The forensic team scoured the scene but found no substantial leads. No fingerprints, no footprints, no trace of how the phone had come to be there. The recording of the call became the focal point of their inquiry, 11 seconds of static, of breathing, of 5 chilling words. Voice analysis confirmed the voice as Catherine Sullivan's, with an eerie 98% certainty. The timestamp aligned precisely with the moment of her passing, 3 years ago to the minute. Morgan and Walsh delved into Catherine's life, questioning those who had known her. Her father, now remarried, seemed genuinely perplexed. Her mother, living in a modest apartment, crumbled upon hearing the recording. "That's my Katie," she murmured. "She sounds so frightened." Catherine's former boyfriend, Mark Jennings, had an airtight alibi for the night of the call. He was at the hospital, working a night shift, corroborated by witnesses and security footage. The house had been empty, the call an impossibility. But the investigation took a turn when Catherine's mother made a startling discovery. "I found her journal," she trembled over the phone. "There's something you need to see." Within the pages of the journal lay a tale of love turned sinister, of control, isolation, and fear. The final entry bore a chilling message. "He found out I'm leaving. He's furious. If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident." Confronted with this damning evidence, Mark's facade crumbled. Denial gave way to unease as Morgan probed deeper. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together, painting a grim picture of manipulation and violence. A revisit to the accident site unearthed Catherine's actual phone, buried 20 feet from the crash site. Forensic examination of the device revealed deleted texts, painting a harrowing picture of her final moments, pursued, terrified, and ultimately silenced. The truth emerged in the form of hidden wounds, overlooked details, and a shrine of obsession in Mark's apartment. His twisted game of deception had unraveled, exposing the darkness that lurked beneath his facade. As Mark sat in custody, his delusions laid bare, justice inched closer. The voice that had called out from beyond the grave had found its echo in the courtroom. And as the gavel fell, Catherine's legacy stood tall, a testament to resilience, to the power of a whisper in the dark. Story 24. The realtor's listing made no mention of a basement. The blueprints held no clues to its existence. But as the family peeled back the layers of old carpet, a hidden door revealed itself. A door with a heavy, rusted handle that required 3 sets of hands to pry open. A musty, stagnant breath greeted them as they descended the steps into the shadows below. The air was thick with the aroma of damp earth, wrapping them in its cool embrace. They had expected a storage space, yet what they discovered was far from ordinary. A solitary chair sat beneath a swaying light bulb, casting a gentle, eerie glow across the room. And on the wall behind the chair, a series of photographs awaited them, photographs of themselves. The Mercers had moved into the suburban property during the harsh winter months when darkness lingered and the trees stood barren against the frosty sky. The aging 2-story home, with its worn siding and creaking floors, had drawn them in with promises of character and history. Little did they know the depth of history entwined within the walls, nor the chilling collision it would have with their present. Detective Sarah Connors arrived at the scene with her partner, the crime scene unit already at work securing the area with fluttering yellow tape. Mrs. Mercer's voice had quivered over the phone as she recounted the hidden chamber beneath their living room. "We must document everything before proceeding further," Connors directed, slipping on latex gloves with practiced ease. The camera flashes punctuated the darkness as the forensics team meticulously captured every detail. The wooden steps groaned underfoot as they descended into the small basement, a space no larger than a standard bedroom, its concrete walls painted a dull gray. In the center of the room, a single chair stood bolted to the floor beneath the harsh glare of the bare bulb. But it was the row of 37 photographs lining the wall that drew their focus. Each image told a story, meticulously arranged in chronological order. "These date back weeks," noted Connor's partner, studying the timestamps on the prints. "Look at this one, Mrs. Mercer asleep on the couch, Mr. Mercer at the kitchen table, the children in their rooms." The investigation revealed no signs of forced entry, no evidence of theft. The security system had remained silent, unaware of the intrusion. Privacy had been breached, a sense of security shattered. Forensics uncovered multiple fingerprints, many belonging to past owners of the property. A dark history began to unfold as they delved into the records of the house, changing hands 6 times in the last decade, each family departing within a year, selling at decreasing prices. None had ever spoken of a hidden basement. "We must interview every previous owner," Connors instructed, flipping through her notes. The case took a sinister turn as they retraced the property's past. Discrepancies in the records emerged: altered blueprints, withdrawn permits, redacted reports. A breakthrough came with the testimony of the contractor who had renovated the house 7 years earlier. His face drained of color at the sight of the basement photos. "There was no such room," he insisted, hands trembling. "I gutted that place to its bones. Nothing but dirt and concrete beneath the living room." Digital forensics uncovered a trove of images on a hidden memory card within the light fixture. Hundreds more snapshots adorned the evidence boards, not just of the Mercers, but of previous families. Children at rest, parents in conflict, moments of intimacy and routine, all captured by an unseen observer. The chilling discovery deepened as audio files were unearthed from a weatherproof box in the basement, recordings of conversations held in the bedrooms, kitchen, and living room. High-quality sound hinted at concealed microphones scattered throughout the house, though none were found in the initial search. "We must search every crevice," Connors urged, her voice edged with urgency. "Inspect the air vents, light fixtures, outlets. The intruder has been watching for years." Beyond the photograph wall, a concealed passage led to a monitoring station, a desk, a chair, a laptop linked to wireless cameras, and a journal filled with meticulous notes on each family's life. Their routines, their quirks, their vulnerabilities, all meticulously documented by Edward Kelvin, the house's original builder. Kelvin's record revealed a mysterious disappearance during the home's construction, with no official trace of his passing. The journal's final entries grew frantic, with phrases like "they never looked down" and "they never see me" repeated obsessively. The last page ominously read, "The next family arrives tomorrow." Fingerprint analysis confirmed Kelvin's presence, revealing he had never left the house, retreating into its secret recesses to watch over the unwitting inhabitants. The manhunt led them to Kelvin curled in a hidden crawlspace between the bedrooms, his gaunt frame attuned to the labyrinth of passages he had crafted within the walls. During interrogation, Kelvin spoke of the families as characters in his private theater, observed with detached fascination. He had never intruded, never stolen, only watched and documented. "They welcomed me in," he murmured softly to the investigators. "They signed the papers, they became mine." Psychological evaluations diagnosed Kelvin with severe delusions, perceiving himself as the guardian of the house rather than an interloper. The Mercers never returned, joining the ranks of families before them who abandoned their possessions, fleeing with only what they could carry. The house stood vacant as the case unfolded in court, unveiling the extent of Kelvin's surveillance network, hidden chambers, covert vantage points, all part of his meticulous plan. When the jury rendered its verdict, Kelvin remained impassive, already lost within the corridors of his mind. The property was razed, the earth beneath it disturbed and sealed. Yet for those who had dwelled within, the specter of intrusion lingered. They found themselves casting wary glances at air vents, light fixtures, the corners where walls met ceiling, wondering if they were truly alone, wondering if they ever had been. Story 25. The new homeowners were quick to dismiss the crackling of the old intercom system as a mere quirk. It was a relic from another era, rewired but left to gather dust in the shadows of the Victorian manor they now called home. Nestled among ancient oak trees, the house seemed to hold secrets within its weathered exterior, secrets that whispered through the crackling intercom late at night. One evening, curiosity got the best of the husband. He pressed the button, and a haunting whisper crackled through the speaker, sending shivers down his spine. "Why did you come back?" The words hung heavy in the air, leaving him trembling, his hands shaking with unease. His wife, standing behind him, denied ever uttering those words, adding to the mystery that enveloped their new home. Daniel and Meredith Parker, drawn to the property by its history and charm, had bought it at a bargain price, despite the real estate agent's cryptic warnings during the initial walkthrough. The vintage intercom system, connecting all rooms in the house, had been a selling point for the couple who cherished the past. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the manor in response to a call about a possible break-in. Yet there was a palpable sense that there was more to the story than met the eye. Daniel, with a haunted look in his eyes, led Detective Reeves through the grand foyer, where he began to unravel the chilling tale that had unfolded within their walls. "It all started with the intercom," Daniel recounted, his voice tinged with fear. Static, whispers, then full sentences. "My wife thought I was losing my mind until she heard it too." In the living room, Meredith sat rigid on an antique sofa, her grip on a steaming mug betraying her inner turmoil. Without preamble, she disclosed the discovery they had made behind a wall in the kitchen pantry, a find that would unearth dark secrets long buried. Behind the wall, concealed in deteriorating plastic, lay a small leather-bound journal. Detective Reeves, with gloved hands, delicately turned the brittle pages, revealing the elegant yet frantic handwriting of Alina, the journal's previous owner. Eliner's entries chronicled her growing fear of her husband Vincent, hinting at a sinister plot against her. Daniel explained that the final entry dated back 30 years, after which Eliner's voice fell silent in the journal. Further investigation revealed that Vincent and Eliner Blackwood had indeed resided in the house, their tragic tale hidden beneath layers of deceit and betrayal. Property records unveiled Vincent's sale of the house following Eliner's mysterious disappearance, with no trace of her existence beyond that final journal entry. As the investigation deepened, a team unearthed human remains beneath the garden shed, confirming the grim fate that had befallen Eliner. Vincent Blackwood, now aged and confined to a care facility, confessed to the murder of his wife. His chilling admission unveiled a web of lies and manipulation that had spanned decades, painting a portrait of a man consumed by his desire for silence and control. The trial swiftly concluded with Vincent pleading guilty to murder, his sentence reflecting the calculated cruelty of his actions. Daniel and Meredith, unable to bear the weight of the house's dark past, sold the property, bidding farewell to the whispers that haunted its halls. Before their departure, they held a solemn memorial for Eliner in the restored garden, a final tribute to the woman who had long been silenced. The intercom system, a conduit for Eliner's voice, was removed by the new owners during renovations, silencing the echoes of the past that lingered within its wires. Detective Reeves revisited the Blackwood case file, pondering the house that had whispered its secrets across time. As she closed the folder, she reflected on the justice that had finally been served, a testament to Eliner's unwavering determination to be heard. Known among law enforcement as the house that answered back, the manor stood as a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Detective Reeves, passing by the property on her way home, would sometimes slow down, listening for echoes of the past carried on the wind, a reminder of the voices that refused to be silenced. Story 26. In the stillness of the morning, a peculiar package arrived at Sarah Miller's doorstep. Unmarked, untraceable, it beckoned with a whisper of mystery. The cardboard box, kissed by the morning dew, held secrets not meant for her. Her address was right, but the name was a stranger's. Ignoring it would have been easy, the sensible choice. Yet curiosity, that insatiable temptress, won the battle within her soul. With delicate fingers, she unraveled the tape sealing the box, anticipating mundane contents. But fate had a different plan. Nestled inside was a lone VHS tape, accompanied by a solitary sticky note commanding her to watch alone. Sarah hesitated, feeling the weight of the black plastic in her hands, an inexplicable heaviness that hinted at forbidden truths. The suburban world outside her window carried on its routine symphony a distant dog's bark, children's laughter, the drone of a lawnmower. Oblivious to the enigma that had just crossed her threshold, Sarah brought the enigmatic package into her home, placing it on her kitchen counter. Daniel Whitaker, a name unfamiliar to her, a name that whispered of enigma and danger. The box's intended recipient, yet a stranger in her world. The tape and its enigmatic message tugged at her, a mystery wrapped in black plastic. Against her better judgment, she succumbed to the pull. As the VHS tape slid into the ancient VCR, static danced on the screen before resolving into a dimly lit room. A man, Daniel Whitaker, emerged from the shadows, his weary visage etched with a tale of injustice and desperation. His voice, soft but resolute, filled the room as he unraveled a story of betrayal and framed innocence. Detective Eliza Ramirez found herself entangled in a web of deceit as she unraveled the threads of Catherine Walsh's murder case. The The appearance of 5 identical tapes, each bearing Whitaker's anguished plea, blurred the lines between truth and fabrication. A narrative woven with precision or a revelation of darker truths, Ramirez navigated the murky waters of a case turned on its head. Catherine Walsh, an unsung hero in a world of corporate shadows. Her pursuit of truth had led to her demise, a whistleblower silenced by malevolent forces. The detective's investigation unearthed a tangled web of deception, each thread leading to the heart of a pharmaceutical giant's corruption. Sarah Miller, an unwitting participant in a drama not of her making, found herself thrust into a narrative of intrigue and conspiracy. A second package arrived, unveiling damning evidence that tipped the scales of justice. Documents bearing Walsh's digital signature, a testament to her courage in the face of deceit. Whitaker's breadcrumbs led to a revelation, a surveillance state within PharmaCorp, a conspiracy to silence the truth at any cost. The walls closed in on the malevolent puppeteers, their intricate facade crumbling in the face of relentless pursuit. In a storage unit, the truth lay bare: a journal of conspiracy, files of incriminating evidence, and a damning confession penned by the hand of corruption. Justice, a silent specter, descended upon the guilty, their reign of deception shattered by the light of truth. Daniel Whitaker, once a fugitive, emerged from the shadows a changed man. The weight of false accusations lifted. He stood as a testament to resilience in the face of adversity. Sarah Miller, a mere bystander turned unwitting hero, pondered the thin line between truth and manufactured reality. In a moment of quiet reflection, Whitaker and Miller stood on the porch where their paths had crossed. A question lingered in the air, unspoken yet heavy with meaning. "Why me?" Sarah whispered, her gaze meeting Whitaker's tired eyes. "The algorithm chose you," he replied, a hint of resignation in his voice. The wrong address, a twist of fate, had led to the unraveling of a grand deception. The VHS tapes, relics of a bygone era, now held a different meaning, a reminder that truth, in its purest form, often arrives in unexpected packages, waiting for the curious souls brave enough to seek it out. Story 27. It arrived in the mail, wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address. A single brass key, worn with time. The homeowner didn't recognize it, but something about it felt familiar. When she slid it into every lock she owned, nothing turned. It wasn't hers. But when she placed it on the coffee table, the old grandfather clock in the hallway let out a single, hollow chime despite having been broken for years. Sarah Miller reported the strange occurrence to authorities after finding the mysterious key. What seemed like an odd mishap soon unraveled into one of the most disturbing criminal investigations the quiet suburban neighborhood had ever witnessed. The responding officer initially dismissed her concerns. A key in the mail, perhaps a mistake, he suggested, but Sarah insisted something felt wrong. The officer reluctantly took the key as evidence, mostly to appease her, placing it in a small evidence bag that would later become central to a sprawling investigation. Detective Robert Harmon received the case filed during the morning briefing. A veteran investigator with a special victims unit, he had developed an intuition for cases that would evolve beyond their seemingly innocuous beginnings. The brass key sat on his desk, unremarkable yet somehow unsettling. Background checks revealed Sarah had no criminal history. A retired high school English teacher, widowed, with 2 adult children living across the country. Nothing suspicious in her financial records, phone logs, or social media. She appeared to be exactly what she claimed, an innocent recipient of something strange. The forensic team found no fingerprints on the key besides Sarah's. The envelope yielded nothing except a generic postmark from the regional distribution center. No DNA, no trace evidence. The key itself was a standard Schlage, available at any hardware store, though well-worn and at least several years old. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when Detective Harmon decided to run the key's unique bidding pattern through the department database. A cold case from 7 years prior had documented an identical key pattern belonging to a storage unit where investigators had found blood-stained carpet, cutting tools, and photographs of unidentified women. The original investigation had stalled without sufficient evidence to identify a suspect. Harmon pulled the dusty case files. The detective who had worked the case had since retired. The storage unit had been rented under a false identity, paid in cash. Surveillance footage had long been overwritten. The evidence collected had yielded partial DNA samples, but no matches in any criminal database. The photographs recovered from the storage unit showed 5 different women, all appearing unconscious. Only 3 had been identified during the original investigation, all reported missing but never found. Their cases remained open, classified as suspected homicides without bodies. Sarah Miller recognized none of the women when shown the photographs. She grew increasingly anxious as the investigation proceeded, installing new locks and a security system in her home. The question lingered, why had someone sent her this key? Harmon ordered a fresh analysis of the original evidence using newer techniques. The partial DNA sample was expanded and run through genealogical databases. This yielded a distant familial match, a second cousin twice removed from the suspect. Working backward through family trees, investigators narrowed their focus to Harold Jenkins, who had lived 2 streets away from Sarah Miller until moving away approximately 6 years ago. His current whereabouts were unknown. Further investigation revealed Jenkins had been a substitute teacher at the same school where Sarah taught, though they had minimal documented interaction. His employment records showed scattered work history, long unexplained gaps, and frequent relocations. His former residence yielded nothing unusual upon inspection. Neighbors described him as quiet, unremarkable, someone who kept to himself, the common refrain that often follows revelations about predators hiding in plain sight. The big question remained unanswered: why send the key now? Why to Sarah Miller? Harmon theorized it might be a trophy, a warning, or perhaps a macabre invitation. The search for Jenkins intensified. His driver's license hadn't been renewed, no credit card activity, no tax returns. The digital breadcrumbs people typically leave behind were conspicuously absent, suggesting an intentional effort to remain untraceable. The true horror of the case emerged when authorities investigated a small cabin registered to Jenkins' deceased mother. Beneath the weathered wooden floorboards, investigators discovered a concealed room accessible only through a trapdoor. Inside, meticulously organized shelves held dozens of identical brass keys, each with a name and date engraved on a small attached tag. 5 keys corresponded to the women from the photographs. The remaining keys, 27 in total, presented a horrifying implication of additional victims previously unknown to authorities. Buried behind the cabin, forensic teams recovered human remains. The excavation continued for weeks as investigators unearthed multiple bodies in varying states of decomposition. Sarah received round-the-clock protection as the manhunt for Jenkins expanded nationwide. Behavioral analysts suggested the key represented a twisted invitation, Jenkins selecting Sarah as someone to appreciate his work. The press dubbed him the Keymaster, a name that spread rapidly across national headlines. Fear permeated the community as residents questioned how such horror had existed among them undetected. Detection dogs tracked the scent from the cabin into the surrounding wilderness. Search teams combed dense forest areas. Thermal imaging drones scanned terrain too dangerous for ground teams. The manhunt became one of the largest in regional history. A wildlife photographer hiking in remote woods captured an image of someone matching Jenkins' description. The grainy photograph showed a bearded man with hollow eyes carrying a backpack, heading deeper into the wilderness. Authorities closed in on the area, establishing a perimeter. Tactical teams navigated difficult terrain while psychological profilers predicted Jenkins would not surrender. They anticipated he might have prepared for this contingency with hidden supplies and escape routes. The final confrontation occurred when a patrol officer encountered Jenkins attempting to cross a river. Rather than surrender, Jenkins retreated to higher ground, where he barricaded himself in an abandoned fire observation tower. Negotiators attempted communication for hours without response. When tactical teams finally breached the tower, they found Jenkins dead from a self-inflicted wound. Beside his body lay a journal containing detailed accounts of his crimes, alongside a single brass key identical to the one Sarah had received. Inside a waterproof container, investigators discovered additional evidence, including photographs, maps marking burial locations, and personal effects taken from victims, a methodically preserved record of atrocities spanning nearly a decade. The journal's final entry addressed Sarah directly. "You never noticed me, but I noticed everything about you. The key opens nothing because what I wanted to give you cannot be unlocked with metal, only with recognition. Now everyone will remember my name." The subsequent investigation identified 32 victims in total. Families who had spent years wondering about missing loved ones finally received answers, though the closure came with the unbearable weight of confirmed tragedy. Sarah never returned to her home, unable to reconcile the horror that had brushed so close to her ordinary life. The grandfather clock that had mysteriously chimed was examined and found to contain a small wireless receiver Jenkins had been watching, waiting for the moment she received his gift. The case remains one of the most disturbing examples of predatory behavior hiding beneath a veneer of normalcy. Psychological researchers continue studying Jenkins' writings, seeking insights to identify similar offenders before they act. And somewhere in an evidence locker, a collection of brass keys sits in silent testimony to lives cut short, each key opening nothing, yet unlocking a devastating truth about the darkness that sometimes hides behind unremarkable facades.